Solutions out there, but
We need lapel mics for everybody. Just kidding.
Ready?
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, we're good. Hello, everybody. Thank you to the Tuesday, December 10th, 2019 Troutdale City Council regular meeting. Dave, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dave. Roll call, please, Sarah.
Counselor Rittma? Here. Counselor Lauer? Counselor Crayons? Here. Counselor White? Counselor Moon?
Here.
Counselor Hudson?
Here.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes. All right, agenda updates.
There are no agenda updates, Mayor. It is as written.
All right, public comment at this time, agenda item number 2. Public comment is on non-agenda and consent agenda items is welcome. Public comment on agenda items will be taken at the time the item is considered. Public comment should be directed to the presiding officer and limited to matters of community interest or related to matters which may or could come before council. Each speaker shall be limited to 5 minutes for each agenda item unless a different amount of time is allowed by the presiding officer with consent of the council. Who'd like to come up and speak tonight? Come on up. Just when you come up, name, city, all that. Come on up, yep.
Good evening. My name is Tina Tebbins of Troutdale, and I'm proud to say it that way. I introduce myself all the time with that. By way of explanation, I'm a former member of the Public Safety Advisory Committee. My husband Carl served for about 7 years on the Citizen Advisory Committee. He also pounded quite a few nails in the barn, and we both were deeply involved in the bond measure that passed to build this building. That's by way of explanation of who we are and how much we care about our community. The issue I'm asking about tonight is basically clarification about a property on Southwest Hensley Road. And I'm aware there have been legal proceedings on this property and that we have a brand new code enforcement officer, so I'm understanding of that. However, at this point, I have a lot of concern about the property at 812 Southwest Hensley. I don't understand how this community allows that. You've got an item on your agenda about waste reduction. I know where it is right now, but I'm deeply concerned about the individual who lives there. There's obviously some huge problems with that person. Even as much as yesterday, I witnessed him piling more on top of a vehicle. I think you all know what I'm speaking of. I count at least 6 vehicles now that are covered up, either covered up, but they're just sitting there. It's getting worse and worse. There has to be a huge problem with vermin. I don't even know. I cannot imagine if my home were next door, and I feel for those people, but I just had to say it instead of just driving by every day to see that horrible condition. That's basically all I wanted to do, is vent my feelings and express concern for the individual. Thank you.
Tina, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
I spoke with the code enforcement officer just today about the issue. I spoke with the clerk about Dr. Hanson's situation today. We are taking it very seriously, and I'm tired of it also.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Anybody else like to speak? All right, moving on. Okay, agenda item number 3. I'm going to have Councilor Rittma please lead us through this.
All right, the consent agenda, 3.1, a resolution accepting the November 5th, 2019 special election results from the Director of Elections, Multnomah County, Oregon. 3.2, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement between Metro and the City of Troutdale for funding the fiscal year 2019-20 Metro and Local Government Annual Waste Reduction Program. 3.3, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County for electronic equipment services. I move adoption.
Second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it passes. Item number 4 is a report from the Port of Portland on the Troutdale Airport and Troutdale Reynolds Industrial Park. I do not see Emerald, but I do see other gentlemen from the port. Come on up, please.
It is with great sadness that the staff reports that Emerald had a prior engagement that we had settled for these two otherwise seemingly fine gentlemen.
Settle is definitely, yes.
For the benefit of the council, I'm handing out some paperwork. Number 1 going by is the trip property map, so you'll know kind of the reference. Number 2 is the a short form of the Troutdale long-term plan, and that will be referenced also, so you'll have something in front of you to look at. I always think maps are fun to play with, so.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. I'm Steve Nagy. I'm the Senior Manager for General Aviation Airports for the Port.
And I'm Ken Anderton, Senior Manager of Real Estate Development for the Port.
So I'll cover some of the issues associated with Troutdale Airport and any questions you may have. And Ken will cover the Port's industrial properties.
And we do apologize to Emerald not being here.
Yes.
She's committed but really wanted to be here today, so we're pitch hitting for
We're pitch hitting
her.
for
Lying
her.
to us.
Right.
How you doing?
I'm doing excellent.
So I'll cover a little bit about the high points that we have here. We're in the process of implementing the 2016 master plan, which the council and was very involved in City of Troutdale. We are completing a study for the south side of the airport. And for the handout that you have, the second page of the airport shows the current configuration of the airport and then a future configuration. The south side is the lower half of the airport there and is the area of future aviation development. In order to complete a runway reconstruct and that south side redevelopment, the FAA required us to do an environmental analysis under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. We are doing an environmental assessment. We are about somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the way done with that environmental assessment. That will allow us to do 2 things when it's complete. 1, to reconstruct the runway as shown on those and as in compliance with the master plan as we had all agreed. And the other is would allow us to attract industry and new business to come and develop on the south side where those hangar lots are shown. We also have, since the last master plan, have funded a study of the south side to look at those parcels, which ones have are most shovel ready, which ones have utilities already to them, which ones have the easiest connections, and which are first in line for development. So we've completed that study. That rolled into the environmental analysis that the FAA is now reviewing, and we expect to have concurrence on that in 2021. And we are still on track for, well, we had originally planned runway reconstruction for 2021. However, because of the complexities of the environmental analysis, we are planning that for 2022 at this point. And we recently completed a runway reconstruction at our Hillsborough Airport this past summer, where we had to relocate. We closed the main runway for that airport for a significant period, 4 months. It affected a lot of the tenants. Some of the operations were impacted. We came up with a unique to the industry method where we have assisted tenants either with relocation or other associated costs due to the impacts of construction. And we are learning from that, and we're going to approach our tenants here with a similar type of outreach in order to keep tenants whole while we have to reconstruct the runway during that summer of 2022. And the last bullet, we're still seeing the same mix of operations of aircraft and basically the fleet mix of what we've had, which is mainly flight training aircraft, recreational aircraft, some twins, turboprops, and the occasional visit of a light business jet. So it's still the same fleet mix of aircraft, still the same uses, hasn't changed any of our calculations for the type and of reconstruction we would do for the runway in 2022.
All right, well, in regards to the Troutdale Reynolds Industrial Park, nowadays it's pretty sleepy in terms of any construction activity. The good thing is Amazon's been up and running for about a year now. It's a busy area right now, especially this time of year. FedEx has future plans for expansion. And really, I think from what we hear from employers is that there's just not enough people to fill those buildings. So, and the good news is the two, I think, is the two are competing against each other, and it's raising some of the hourly rates down in the park. When we look at like the future, we have lots. We don't have a lot of lots at Trip left. We have lot 4 and 5 and 9, and the port has made a conscious effort to try to really focus on more of a sector of jobs. Since we have the logistics kind of class jobs down there, we feel like there needs to be a little bit more balance in terms of the type of jobs, like manufacturing sector. And that's really what we're focused on our recruitment efforts on, is trying to reach out to our marketing staff has gone to manufacturing conferences, has been following up leads with GPI in the state of Oregon, Business Oregon, and then really trying to, figure out what would be the best fit on those remaining lots. So that is ongoing. I wish I could say we had a tenant for those 3 lots. Right now we don't. The manufacturing sector is a tough one to try to tap into and bring into Oregon. We were successful at Gresham Vista with a diamond manufacturer, but those are tough to find, but we continue searching. The natural resource aspects of the project, it is going fantastic in terms of, I'm a real estate geek, and I look out, and the cool thing about my job is I get to build industrial lots, commercial lots, but I also get to build environmental type lots that enhance the the environment and the community. And our mitigation site, if you look down there along Marine Drive, is thriving and is meeting all our goals. And it's important because we have federal goals for our permit over a 10-year period that it has to sustain itself. Other good news is our first phase, which is FedEx, where we filled wetlands, that was now submitted to the Corps for final certification, and that essentially means they're doing well, and they're going to do well into the future. The 40-mile loop trail is also another initiative we're taking on in partnership with Metro and ODOT. ODOT is doing the federal contracting because they have the expertise with that type of money to do that construction and design. It's fully designed. Only problem is the Corps will be releasing soon its preferred options for the levee certification through the Sandy River all the way down to the Willamette River. And that could impact a couple sections that we have to look at. Do we change the design, or is that going to be off in the future? So that is still slated for completion. I believe it's in 2021 is what we're currently planning. Also, CRG finished their building. That was about a year-long process, and now they've gone in for permits for I think it's public knowledge, but it's CNS Grocers. It's about 150 employees, and which we can't wait to see them operating. We continue to, ongoing on the recruitment efforts in East County. I'm also the East Metro Economic Alliance president. Spent a lot of my time working with employers and also trying to generate business here. So you have our full faith and commitment to try to work toward bringing quality jobs to your community. One last thing is we had sold Bonneville Power Administration, Lot 11 on Lot 12. Really, Lot 11's their land vacant until they can build a substation. Lot 12 was just a utility lot. It didn't have a lot of industrial capability to build. But they did find a tenant, potential tenant that their name is Able Grid. They went in for interconnection agreements and studies. It'll take about a 3-year process, but potentially a grid storage project, which is essentially battery storage, which is really cool, high investment, great use for that lot, and it doesn't cause any traffic or issues. So it's the perfect type of tenant you want. I guess I'll just open it up for any questions that you may have on.
Just had a quick question on what you just mentioned about the batteries. Are there many of those around the area?
It's emerging technology. It's more and more being procured because of a lot of it because of their renewables. It helps. The idea is, when the wind blows, it's not necessarily when you need the power, and so Same with the solar, and it sinks the energy, and then they resell it out in the wholesale market when it's the price is higher.
Yeah, I watched a show on it recently. That's why I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was actually a
Yeah,
thing.
and
Yeah.
Australia's actually, there's some really cool test studies in Australia of where they're having really blackouts and they've smoothed out their grid somewhat. I'm not a power expert, but I am a kind of a power geek in studying this. And the cool thing again about my job is I get to understand about 1% of the knowledge of each industry. So that'll be really interesting if they can bring that to fruition.
Yeah.
I thank you for being here and presenting. I think it'd be really important for us with the remaining lots that we have to really try and look for securing higher paying types of clients or customers to buy those. So if there's anything that we can do to kind of help and encourage that type of job growth, I think that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. We definitely will tap into your staff and
Perfect.
you as counselors.
I hear one more thing about what Councilor Krantz just brought about, like lot 5 and some of these smaller lots. Do you guys ever go after more? I'm a small business owner, so that's a big thing for me. Is like instead of attracting these really giant companies, is there any? I know there's like Portland's got all these like micro, that's like a large building that's divided up into many segments for small business and small manufacturing.
We have studied that, and I'm a big proponent of looking at all ends of the employment sector in terms of what capital investors like CRG and others and Travel Crow, they tap into institutional money. The best returns right now is these big boxes that they're building. Second to that is actually self-storage, and all those self-storage boxes you're seeing going up. The returns are great and the expenses are low. And so that's why they're doing it. The missing segment really is the smaller format buildings that can house smaller businesses. So we have thought of that, and if there is interest, we would certainly, it's great to understand that if a smaller mini business park with flex space.
Because I'm in a business park right now, and the average size is, maybe 25, mine's about 2,500 square feet, and they're just always full, and it's always hard to get in there, so it just seems like, and there's nowhere else to go, so I'm just curious if, trying to go after that small business. I realize that, if investors are like, hey, I can make 10 times more by building a big giant box, then
Yeah, definitely. That's where the institutional market is, but, is there a niche to be played there? Maybe with a private partner as well. The challenge is right now is for small business on industrial is the average demisable space is usually 10,000 or more, so it's harder for a small business to find those small industrial spaces. I'm a proponent of that. We haven't landed on anything yet, but it's something certainly that I'd love to study personally.
all right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Happy holidays too.
Good seeing you, bud. Thanks for your commitment to Troutdale.
Absolutely.
Trying to further that personally. Appreciate it. All right, agenda item number 5. It's a motion accepting the selection committee's recommendation for appointments to the Budget Committee, Citizens Advisory Committee, Historic Landmarks Commission, Park Advisory Committee, and the Planning Commission.
We're going to take them one at a time?
Um,
I think we usually do. But
yeah, I think whatever we've
Past,
done in
it's
the
up to
past.
council, however they want to do it.
I think in the past, we've been doing it one at a time, so let's do that. We'll go through each one, because there are individual committees with individual applications for each committee, so.
Well, I'm happy to make a motion.
And what we're going to do is we'll make a motion for each one, and then we'll open it up for discussion, and we'll go through each and every one, so. And then we'll open it up to public comment on, at the end of.
Sure. Well, for the Budget Committee, position number 4, Tanny Stephenson. Position number 5, Sandy Glantz. Alternate, Paul Wilcox.
Discussion. Well, we can have a second, yeah, second.
Second.
Okay, so open for discussion. Ray, I know that Council Lauer had a written message he wanted you to read, so this is probably as good as time.
If you want to start that way, so he's not here, so I'll just read you. Yeah, Councilor Lauer sent me an email with his position on the Budget Committee nominations. council, staff, and public in attendance. I wanted to first apologize for my absence at tonight's meeting. My wife and I are celebrating our 2nd anniversary and could not be here tonight. Also, I'd like to apologize for my confusion during the committee selection interviews and the process we all thought we agreed to during last year's interview fiasco. It was my understanding we agreed to a policy that if you turned in your application to a citizen committee late, your application would not be accepted. We'll call this the Canfield Clause. Now, somewhere along the way, we muddled the waters a bit by amending the policy to allow late applicants if the committee they applied to had more vacancies than applicants. I'm not sure when and where this was agreed to, but this serves as the point of my confusion during the interview meeting. I did not and do not agree to this amendment. Let me be clear here. I value all our citizen volunteers and the time they invest in their community. It is a thankless task they take on and one that we as council appreciate greatly. In saying that, I view the application process and the subsequent committee interviews as a job application and a job interview process. If you want the job you seek, you must apply for it on time and in the manner presented to you, no question. And if you and your application want to be considered, you must interview in person for the position applied for, no question. This is the only way we can ensure that we, as a council and selection committee, remain impartial, fair, and transparent during the process. Unfortunately, this invalidates the application of Tanny Stephenson for the Budget Committee. I appreciate the time Tanny has devoted to the city's Budget Committee and processes, but I cannot in good faith continue with my recommendation to approve Mr. Stephenson's appointment to the Budget Committee. I invite Tanny to apply on time for the Budget Committee during the next application process. Signed, Randy Lauer, and I'll give this to Miss Sarah over there to put in the record.
That's right.
Well,
And then what I want to do is I want to follow protocol on this, so we're going to everybody's going to have a chance to talk. We're not going to, and then if you want to talk again, you can talk when everybody else has a chance. So, Councilor Rittman.
well, yeah, I ran the selection meetings both last year, which was a fiasco, I admit, and this year. And we did discuss what the reason we decided to accept Tanny Stephenson's application. The reason was we had fewer applicants for the slots available than we had slots. The last year, and it was a fiasco, and I apologize to Mr. Canfield for that fiasco, but we did not have, we had actually more applicants than slots last year. And I remember the meeting, which was, what, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, that we discussed this very point. And Randy maybe was confused, but I was not confused. We had 23 openings to fill, and there were 13 applicants, some of whom asked for 2 slots. We don't always grant that, but even that was only 19. So there weren't enough applicants to fill a slot. Tanny was there at the meeting to interview, and anyway, so that is my recollection of it. And I appreciate Randy's concern, but to change the what we did to Mr. Canfield was unfair. We called him in and then told him we weren't going to consider it. It was embarrassing. It was a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. But to actually pick Tanny and then now, at this point, decide not to is even worse. So I don't think it corrects the problem. I think we ought to adhere to the rule. If there's enough applicants, we won't accept late. That makes sense. And if there isn't enough applicants, and someone shows up, applied late, but shows up for the interview, we should consider them. I think that makes sense. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Okay, well, you want to go next?
Yep.
Or I can go? Okay, let's go
we'll
in a
just
row.
go around.
Yeah.
Having served as a volunteer on planning and budget and town center previous to serving on council, I've always found that the committee selection process is a little wonky and unclear, and I believe that it is one of our highest priorities at the moment when we go through our council goals to get a bit of to get a clearer, streamlined process for this situation. And what had happened with Mr. Canfield while I wasn't on council last year was, like Councilor Rittma had just said, was a completely communication mistake that occurred, and it came out very poorly. But I think ultimately, all of us are here because we have a passion for leadership, and we want to be leaders, and we want to be integrated with our community at a level that serves. And I think that I think Councilor Lauer brings up some good points. There was a deadline, and it was missed for whatever reasons, but I think that also Tanny's given us so many years of service that it's a difficult situation. And I think one of my bigger fears too is that we only had 23 applicants, or 23 openings and 13 applicants. So we aren't really seeing people come back. So we aren't getting a new, it seems like if people weren't put into a position in 2018, they didn't reapply this year. And I don't remember all of the details on last year's committee selection process. But I think that it is our job as leaders to be fair with the rules and consistent as we work through this difficult situation. And if we amend what happened at the committee selection meeting, it's just 1 year, and we'll have another year. And I also have a big challenge with folks who are currently sitting on specifically the budget committee who don't attend the 3 to 5 meetings that we have per year. And so I would like to question Ray perhaps and wonder, where is our policy for the folks who are in a role that haven't shown up? We have not seen Mr. Kaderi for quite some time.
I'm trying to think, what is the rule for numbers? Mr. Trumke, do you have that one on the? It's odd for the budget committee because there's really only 2, maybe 3 required meetings in the spring. Even the half-yearly meeting is just a work session. So the budget committee, it's very critical to be there. And I think that's what Mr. Cordry said this year. He's told us that he didn't reapply because he found he didn't have time to do it. So,
and perhaps we might have an extra vacancy is what I'm getting at. So we have a situation here where we might have to follow the rules, but we might also have a vacancy.
The ordinance says that the office may be declared vacant by action of the committee or by the council for non-performance of duties if the incumbent fails to attend 3 consecutive meetings of the body. So either you or the committee can declare the vacancy.
I was just going to say that Mr. Kadiri's term ended at the end of this year, and he didn't reapply. So
Oh, okay, that was the other challenge that I really have with this whole process, is I don't have the full picture, so I'm not sure what we're, where we're at. So I'll leave it at there, and I probably have a little bit more to say, but we'll pass the baton.
Okay, so my opinion on this is last year what happened to Mr. Canfield was not okay. And so come into this year, the one hard and fast rule we had is if you were late, you were late. I get in the past where we have had multiple, if somebody doesn't make a certain committee, we ask them to serve on another committee. But where I'm having a trouble with is we had 4 people apply for the budget committee. 3 of the 4 got their application in on time. The one person that didn't get their application on time was Tanny Stephenson. So why are we asking one of those 3 people who got there, who asked to be on the budget committee? They didn't ask to be on another one. They asked to be on that one particularly. Why would we ask that person to go serve on another committee? Why don't we ask Tanny to go serve on another committee? I don't understand why we're allowing 3 citizens who did everything they were asked to do to serve on the budget committee. Somewhere inside of themselves, they felt their best service to this city was to serve on the budget. They did everything they were asked to do. One person, for whatever reason, we gave 3 months to get the application in on time, didn't get in on time. It doesn't matter if it was 5 minutes or it was 5 days. Who's gonna call that one person and say, thank you for following the rules, thank you for doing everything, coming out of your comfort zone to interview for the first time ever, but we're going to choose someone else who was late because they've already served on the committee. Let's flip it around now. Let's say we had 4 people on the committee that applied. Of the 4, one of the new people was 4 minutes late. would we be sitting here today talking about why that person deserves to be on the budget committee? We wouldn't be, because they were late. Let me finish. That's what I feel. And I have thought about this in every way possible. This has nothing to do personal with Tanny or anything like any of that. That's why I'm just having trouble. Who's going to call that person and say, hey, sorry, the group has decided to ask you if you'll serve on parks? Well, I don't want to serve on parks. I didn't put parks for a reason. I put the budget because that's how I felt. What did I do wrong? Oh, you didn't do anything wrong. We just chose the person who was late because they've been on the committee for 18 years. Oh, okay, that sounds fair. It's not okay. And you could, just wait. It's not okay. And last year was the first year we asked people who were reapplying to come in. The first time we did do the legacy rule. And we had a gentleman come in that was late, and he was late, and we didn't even consider his service. We didn't consider that he was a duly elected city councilor. We didn't consider that he'd served our city for a long time as a committee member. We just said, you're late, sorry. Sorry, you're late.
Well, it was more than that. I mean, I was
No,
there.
I'm
just saying.
I'm just saying, you guys, and I
You
get
say
it.
you weren't there.
But you know what? But tonight is when we confirm it. Tonight is when we confirm it. It's not confirmed at the meeting. If it was confirmed at the meeting, it'd be different. Tonight's the night we confirm it. So my vote tonight's important. And I did my research and I looked into this. And so you can feel, I'm not telling anybody to change the way they feel. This is not personal. I would be absolutely outraged as a citizen of Troutdale if I did everything I was asked to do, and I came down here and interviewed in front of a group of people, and I did everything to find out that I got bumped. And anybody else would be too. So, that's it.
Well, I kind of feel the opposite.
Well, of course you do. You're Candy's friend.
Well, I think a lot of people are, and that, anyway, I think if you would have, like Dave said, had you been there, you would have.
Okay,
got
let's
a
straighten this
better
up right
feel.
now. So everybody knows where I was 3 weeks ago. I had a Japanese exchange student in town.
I didn't know that.
Okay, well, I don't need to check with you, Glenn, when I don't be here, when I'm not
saying
here.
you do.
And so I felt the dinner that they prepared for their host families and the going away was more important than being here. Okay, I'm sorry that I did that. 2 weeks ago, I fired both of my manager, or last week, and I ended up being at a branch till 9:15 at night. It's a volunteer position. I do the best I can to get here. Me not being there at the meeting does not change the fact. If I was at that meeting, I would have thought the same exact thing.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
trying to make it personal at
No,
all.
you just said I wasn't here. I just want to straighten that out.
Well,
Okay?
I was.
That's okay.
You didn't
Go.
let me finish though, because what I was gonna say is we went over that. Ray cleared it up. I met with Ray before the meeting started. I wanted to make sure, because of what happened at the previous year, that we weren't in violation of any rules, and we weren't. And it was even brought up, and I said, you know, we owe it to the town not to pick the most qualified person, not just because you showed up, because it's hard to serve on those volunteer committees. And you need a group that's can work together. If you get a wingnut on a group, that happens sometimes. It's very disruptive.
So we're
And
saying the
that's
people
when
we didn't on, that we might have been a wingnut?
No, I'm not finished yet. Okay. And we used to not even have our chairs reapply, or veterans that have been on our committees. We automatically reinstated them because it's often hard to get enough volunteers for these positions. But we decided, because we wanted new counselors to meet them, that we have them come in and apply. And it was also a chance for us to thank them for their service. And if anybody deserves thanks, you know, Tanny does an outstanding job, and it's a daunting task to be on budget. You have to know about public works, police, fire, parks, planning, metro, urban renewal. It's $50 million a year, and it comes out of our pockets. I want the best, most qualified person there. And the person that didn't get picked for it was at the last budget meeting. And if I wanted to say something about that, I would right now, but I'm not going to. But his comments.
You know, Glenn, some of us have jobs, okay? So I know that you can dedicate every hour of your life to this, but if you're gonna throw low jabs because I missed a budget meeting, I'm gonna
didn't.
call you out. That's what you were doing there, partner. So, okay, that's
Okay.
what you were doing. So just, let's just call
Can
what
I
it is.
finish? I gave you your time.
Okay,
Can I finish?
then don't do the low blow stuff.
Tim was at the meeting, and afterwards, he was so impressed with Tanny's abilities as chair that he was talking to me about it. He was genuinely impressed with him. And I think if you ask that person, they'd probably say, by all means, I do not want to see this dedicated volunteer bump because of me. But there's also going to be openings on the committee. It sounds like Rob wasn't there again. I think he may have dropped off without us knowing. And there was a recent email on Kyle saying that he had scheduling conflicts and he was not reapplying.
I missed that.
Yeah, the
got
young
a
man at the
recent
budget
email.
committee half-year
So
meeting, yeah.
we have plenty of
Not
openings.
reapplying for it, okay.
But to do what we just did, Rob's thing happened in a vacuum. It was a mistake on the city recorder. She called in, we were running ahead of schedule. So she went down, we asked her to go down the list and start calling people in early. And she didn't know Rob had filed late and accidentally called him. So Rob Canfield walks in to do his interview, only to be told that he wasn't going to be accepted as an interview because we had fewer openings and quite a bit more people applying for the position. But what we just did to Tanny was put him on the agenda tonight at a public meeting, a man who has served this, and the decision was made that night. All this stuff was brought up before we even started the process. And, I hate to see us go backwards because we've been all getting along so well. But I really think this was a bigger blunder than what accidentally happened to Rob Canfield. And the way to correct it is just to forward the nominations that were approved at that committee. Or start over, start from scratch.
I was not at the meeting either. I was also working. But if I was there, I would have agreed the same way I feel now, which is if you're late, you're late. I appreciate Tanny. I was at the budget meeting. He's a great guy. But the thing with rules is that you've got to adhere to them, guys. It's pretty straightforward. If you're late, it's unfortunate, but you're late. I don't have any. I think we're talking way too long about a pretty simple thing. But if there's more openings, we can open up the application process. I don't know how that works, but I don't see the discussion. I see that if it's late, it shouldn't be. If I was here, I would have said the same exact thing. I would have been like, well, why are we discussing it when that application was late? So I feel the same way Councilor Lauer and Mayor Ryan do.
I'd like to speak in support of Tanny in this case. And I think one thing that has come up is the idea that if you're late, or it doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or it's 5 days. And I'd like to contest that, because I think it does matter, especially when there's an emergency situation such as what Tanny was facing, which he explained at the time. When I was first serving on the Citizens Advisory Committee and interviewing people during that process, there was a gentleman who was scheduled on the meeting that night. This wasn't a question of application. It was a question of scheduled meeting times because we had the slots. He missed it. We figured he was a no-show. 45 minutes later, he comes in, panting from running and close to tears. His family dog had an emergency. They had to take him to the vet. And he told us about how important this was and how much he wanted to be there on time, but something took priority. Everybody on the committee in that case understood because we all said, yeah, emergencies come up, and we understand that. That's different than, I forgot or I put it off too long. Tanny's situation, which he can expound on further if he feels like it, I believe was a legitimate emergency because he had the application ready to go and was ready to turn it in that day. An emergency arose. He was unable to get it in, and he turned it in the next day. This really is not a 5-minute late situation. This really is a 5-minute late situation. And he had an excuse that at the time, I believed everyone who was serving on the committee that night accepted as, well, yep, that's a legitimate emergency, and these things happen. very different than, for instance, somebody applying 2 weeks later. As evidence of this, remember John Lowell, who is also a hardworking, long-serving member of our committees, did turn in his application 2 weeks late. And we all agreed, yeah, 2 weeks late is not going to cut it. But that's how I see the difference between the two situations, because one was a legitimate response to an emergency, and another was what would be much more considered a truly late application.
Quick question on the way, I apologize, this is a real quick one. Can we accept scanned or emailed applications? Are we set for that, or does it have to be in person?
Oh, no, they could come in any way you want. Send by carrier pigeon, we'll take them.
Okay.
As long as they're on time, I guess.
I just wanted to clarify or respond on the issue of the 3 people asked to be on the Budget Committee and their applications were in on time. All 3 of them were appointed. They had, 2 of them picked 2 committees. Often that's an either or, by the way. I mean, that's the way in my experience, but be that as it may, all 3 of them got appointed to something. Paul Wilcox was alternate on the Budget Committee, but it sounds like it's very soon going to be, he'll be a full-fledged member because people are disappearing. But anyway, late is late. I'm just responding to Nick. I fully appreciate that, but and I am somewhat swayed by the circumstances that Zach mentioned in this particular case. But the rule, and maybe we shouldn't have this rule, but I think it's a good one, is if there aren't enough applicants to fill the slots and somebody shows up ready to interview and we have an opening and they're willing to be considered, that to me is a reasonable rule, even if they're late. If we already had enough applicants and they were late, we have to say, sorry, please reapply. We appreciate your interest. However,
But is that a rule, though? That's not a rule we...
That's the rule that I understood it to be.
Okay, and that's
I
what...
really did at the time. It wasn't by the committees they identified so much as the total number. Last year, we had quite a few more applicants. It was very unusual than we had openings. I don't recall in all my years on council that ever happening before, frankly. But that was what happened last year. And the way we handled Mr. Canfield's situation was appalling. Having him come in was not intended, but we owe a huge apology. But in this case, Tanny, we did discuss it. Well, anyway, those of us who were here did discuss this very point and decided that we would accept his application because there weren't enough applicants to fill the slots. We'd still have to reopen for more. We considered doing that, but he was there, he was interviewing, and so that's why I favor just voting yes on the motion that I made, that we accept the 3 of them.
Yeah, I'm gonna have public comment, so, yeah, so, no. Yeah, I'm gonna open it up. Yep, I'll open it to public comment right now, so.
Mayor Ryan and the Troutdale City Council, I have come to you tonight to talk about the city's appointment process for committees and commissions. It was just about this time last year that I applied to be reappointed to the Budget Committee, and I assumed it would be a formality because I was already on the committee, and in the past, current committee members were usually reappointed. And I'll be up front, last year I submitted my committee application late. However, I didn't believe that was an issue because the city emailed me an acknowledgement of my application and gave me an appointment time of, I believe it was 8:45 p.m. to come here to meet with the selection committee. And on the evening of the committee interviews, At about 8 p.m., I was home eating dinner when I received a phone call from the city, and they said the committee's interviews were finishing earlier than they anticipated and asked me if I would be willing to come down and be interviewed as soon as I could get to the meeting location. So I got in my car a few minutes later. I was here, and I sat down with the rest of the audience while the selection committee completed its interview of a candidate for one of the committees. So after they finished interviewing the previous candidate, I stood up to go to the interview table here, and it took just a few steps before Councilor Ripma, who apparently was chairing the committee that evening, said, unfortunately, I was not eligible on being on a committee because my application was not turned in on time. Now explain to Councilor Ripma that he must be mistaken. He must be mistaken because a few days prior to that, the city had emailed me an appointment time to be interviewed, and I also told the selection committee, hey, the city recorder just called me a few minutes ago to come on down here. And then Councilor Ripma explained again that since my application had not been submitted on time, I would not be eligible to be interviewed or reappointed to the Budget Committee. At that moment, I was shocked, I was embarrassed, I was angered, and I was humiliated by this committee and the city's actions. In my entire life, I had never, ever been treated with such disrespect and contempt. So I got angry, and I asked the committee, what kind of a clown show were you running here? Because I said, you actually called me a few minutes ago to come on down here. I said, if I was not eligible to be on the committee, you should have told me a week before. I also told the committee that in past years, people like John Lowell had gotten their committee applications in late, other people had gotten their applications in late, but they were still appointed to the committee. And then I told the committee, if this is the way they treated a former city councilor, if this is the way they treated a former longtime member of the Budget Committee, I told you folks, I shuddered at the thought of if they treated me this way, how are you treating the average citizen themselves? If you treated someone who's been a longtime member of the Budget Committee, who's been active in city government for years, if you treat me this way, how are you going to treat the average citizen? Now, a lot of you have reminded me that back when I was on the Troutdale City Council, I was a part of the selection committee. We never disqualified anybody to a lack of an application, never. In addition, a lot of times, as many of you pointed out, we reappointed members of the committee without even interviewing them. They didn't have to show up for an interview. Now, I was told a couple days ago that this year's selection committee has a current member, Tanny Staffinson, who turned his commission application late. But according to the rules, apparently this is the Canfield exception, the rules that you yourselves implemented last year, he should have been made ineligible because he did not bring his application in one time. And then I found out by looking at the agenda for tonight's meeting that the city has recommended to be reappointed by the Budget Committee even though his application was turned in late. So you're forsaking your own rules. Late application, no appointment. Now, I was also informed that at the selection committee, several of city councilors said that due to Mr. Staffinson's long history of service on city committees, he should be reappointed to a Budget Committee. I also had long history of service with city committees, and I was on a city council. Last year, I called your committee process a clown show, but I was wrong. By forsaking the very policy you set last year, a policy apparently known to you as a Canfield exception, if you appoint Mr. Stephenson to any city committee or commission this year, even though he failed to submit the application on time, your process will not even be deserved to be called the clown show. If you appoint Mr. Stephenson or anyone else to any committee or commission this year, even though they failed to submit an application on time, your committee and the city council will deserve its real name, the corruption show. Now, I remember when I was reappointed, as for the last time, as it turned out, to the Budget Committee, several of you, including Councilor White, objected to my being reappointed to the Budget Committee because I didn't have a finance or accounting degree. However, several members of the committee recognize my long experience with private budgeting and my extensive knowledge of how the wheels turned with the city of Troutdale and where the money really needed to be put. But the following year, I was in the audience watching Troutdale's committee and commission selection process interview several candidates, and I was impressed because several of these candidates had advanced finance and accounting degrees. Several of them did. One candidate was even a director of budgets for Multnomah County. But oddly enough, you on the selection committee failed to appoint any of these highly qualified candidates. Instead, you appointed your personal friends to the budget committee, none of whom had absolutely any experience with budgets or finance. None of them. So right now, members of the City Council, I urge you to step back from the precipice. Step back from a potentially corrupt committee selection process and obey the very rules you yourself set. Obey the very rules you yourself set. Do not appoint Mr. Stephenson to a committee this year. He did not submit his application on time. According to the rules you made last year, the rules you made, he is not eligible to be appointed, and I urge you to step back from the precipice. Obey the very rules you yourself set. Do not appoint Mr. Stephenson to a committee this year. He did not accept his application on time. According to the rules you all made last year, you all made this rule, he is not eligible to be appointed. So members of the City Council, in closing, I'm just wondering, are you going to do the right thing tonight? Or are you going to show the entire city of Troutdale, 16,000 plus residents, that you have lost all your integrity? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else? Paul Wilcox, please.
Paul Wilcox, Troutdale. I think I'll be a little shorter than Rob was. I was at the selection committee meeting on the 19th of November as an applicant. And for starters, City Manager Ray Young, in his introductory remarks, one of the first things he brought to the committee's attention was that there'd been two late applicants, Tanny for budget and planning, and John Lowell for CAC. And then Mr. Young went on to explain that John Lowell's application, he was denied an interview because there had been 5 applicants for CAC for 5 openings. And then Mr. Young went on to explain Tanny's situation was that there were openings, so his application would be accepted. What Mr. Young didn't specify was there were indeed openings on planning. There was only one on-time applicant for 4 openings. On budget, on the other hand, you had 3 applicants, 3 on-time applicants. Now, the rule was your late application would be accepted if there were more openings than the applicants, right? Your application would not be accepted if there were enough applicants or more applicants than openings. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Mr. Stephenson is not eligible for budget. That's all I have on that subject. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify, as Mr. Wilcox is want to correct staff, thank you very much for that, Paul. I will add one more thing that I did say. The one difference between Lowell and Mr. Stephenson was, I indicated, was that Mr. Stevenson's came in right the next day after the deadline, and so we had time to do a background check on him, so he could be on the list because background check was done. Mr. Lowell's was only received a couple weeks earlier than the meeting, and we didn't get a chance to do a background check on him. So I also indicated, in addition to the things that Mr. Wilcox said, I did also add that why there was, from a staff point of view, a difference between the two, because Stevenson was qualified to having the background check done and Lowell wasn't. And second of all, as a side note, we have 5 current vacancies right now, and we already have the Facebook webpage and article in the Champion to advertise. So we are going to be doing more interviews toward the end of January to fill up those vacancies. So we have another round going to fill those. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add at that point.
Anybody else like to speak?
Diane Castillo-White of Troutdale, Oregon. I do know Tanny Stephenson, and I consider it, well, anyway, I'm on a couple of committees, and I've been going to council meetings, planning meetings, and budget meetings for about 14 years or so. I consider myself a fair, unbiased person, that I could look at an individual, whether they be, I've developed a friendship with or not, and just take them on their merits. I'm going to have to say, as a citizen of Troutdale, when I go to the budget meetings, it's hard for me to understand the information. I like to go to a lot of them because it helps me on citizen advisory. The more meetings I go to, the more I have a holistic, comprehensive of what's going on, so that when I do open my mouth, I feel like I enjoy it, and then I can feel like I really have, learned a lot. Tanny does a fabulous job in that, as a citizen, and I care about my money and how it's spent, it's very nice to have him on chair. I see him politely lead it while giving everybody their time to speak fairly. He doesn't lead conversation, or he doesn't have biases or an agenda. And that's what I like when I support leadership and people coming up like, that really care about the citizenry, and it's about servant leadership, and it's not about themselves. So I go to these, when I go, this is just awesome that he is chairing that, because he has so much wisdom and knowledge that as a citizen, I feel good about that. So it looks like, I'm on Citizens Advisory Committee, it looks like you have some stuff to figure out to solidify get a clearer process, because it looks a little wonky here. I mean, I'm hoping that what you all did on that night, I didn't attend, that it was a legal process. I'm just saying that I really support him for his wisdom. I respect him. His hours of preparation. When you go to a budget meeting, when you go to a planning meeting, I mean, it's just, you could just tell that he really cares. He cares about the community. He works well with staff. And so, although other people did apply, I can't see that not knowing them, that they'd be as qualified as Tanny, because then he does know our, all the different committees and safety, and he has a long history and knowledge base of all the different finance slots and the history of it as well. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak?
I would like to Tanny, I didn't know you were coming up.
I figured I'd come up.
Oh, please.
Mayor Ryan, councilors, Tanny Stephenson. I'd like to apologize, because I think you've been put in a difficult position. But, you know, Rob came up and talked about the emotions of being shocked, embarrassed, angered, and humiliated, and I think I can relate to all four of those. I do have to say, my application was late. Don't disagree with that. But I don't know that it's really necessary to be lectured on doing things on time. I would have to think that my previous attendance record would show for that. So I think that's really a little on the low side. I just want to clarify a couple of things. One, it was brought up that someone who had county budgeting experience was not put on the committee, and actually the person that had county budgeting experience was Rob Kadiri, and he was put on the committee. And the selection process is a little interesting sometimes. I respect what Mr. Canfield said. I will also say that, you know, I have lobbied to put Mr. Canfield on a committee when his application's been late and when he wasn't there for his interview. 2 different times. There's not a lot. I don't really want to go further into this. I think it's a tough position for the city, and I'm sorry that you're in that position. I'd just like to say, you know, pending the decision that's made tonight, I'd like to have an opportunity to address you again on a relative subject matter. Okay.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.
Councilor Ritma, you had something? Oh, come on.
I'll wait.
Hello, thank you. I'm Tana Canfield, and as a Troutdale citizen, I was always very proud of Troutdale. I served Troutdale a lot. I enjoyed my service on the budget committees, on the urban renewal committees, and I also came to meetings in support of the different issues that I believed in, and I definitely made an impact on the budget committee. So what I find in the last year or so, I'm disappointed. It's frustrating, it's disappointing, and even being a member of, I was a paralegal, and it's quite frankly just, I think, a huge disappointment in the way that the city and what you have before you, what has happened. And I just hope that you bring back integrity, and I'd like to see the city of Troutdale rock on. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? All right, Councilor Ritma, thanks for your patience.
All right, I just wanted to explain that first of all, when I talked to Mr. Canfield the night I had to deliver the news that we weren't considering his application, I was speaking for the committee. We did discuss it quite a while, actually, because it was going to be awkward and embarrassing and unfortunate, and there was we discussed it thoroughly. I happened to be the one that had to deliver it, and I don't recall. I recall total silence from everybody else. Nobody envied me having to say what I said, and Mr. Canfield was polite, but I knew it hurt, and once again I apologize. It was a disaster, but I also emphasize that the way I saw the rule is, and the way we discussed it, and the way I understood it, was that if we had enough applicants to fill the slots, we wouldn't consider late applicants, period. It didn't have to do with their preference for which committee. And I don't know, Ray and I never talked about that because we didn't know it was going to come up. And this isn't, I mean, this is a rule that's evolving, and maybe we shouldn't even have this rule. But it won't fix what happened last year by kicking Tanny out. We did discuss it at length, whether we should accept and consider his nomination, and the reason we did was because we had fewer applicants than we had openings. And I think it's a sensible, clear rule. It isn't a failure on the part of, or corruption on the part of the council not to follow our rules. It is our rule. That's the way I see it. And I think we should, if we accept the way the decision was made on the recommendation that's before us, we will have further clarified a rule that wasn't very clear. I mean, I admit that. I didn't know it wasn't clear, but that unless, because we're looking for applicants, and we're short on applicants usually, and someone shows up who made an application and is otherwise qualified and is ready to be interviewed, and we have openings, I think we should accept them. That's what we decided to do that a couple weeks ago. And so we're not violating our rules or committing some sort of corruption on the part of the council. We're actually following a rule that was established last year, just not very clearly. And we're following it again this year. It's more clear, I think. The council ought to discuss whether we should continue with this, but I think it's a good rule. If we don't have enough applicants for the slots and somebody who's qualified and did apply, albeit late, is there and willing to be interviewed, we ought to consider them, but that's my feeling. So anyway, I wanted to clarify what happened and say, I again am sorry about last year, but I didn't know it was going to come back to bite us this way.
Specific to this year's committee selection process, we had, if you can refresh my memory, we had 4 applicants for budget committee.
There were 3 timely applicants and Mr. Stebbins.
So is it Tim Eric who is not slated?
Applicants we have were Sandy Glantz, Paul Wilcox, Timothy Eric, and Tammy Stephenson, and we had 3 positions.
Got it. That's what I wanted to know. I was just double checking who didn't get on, who had applied on time.
So we had 3 and 3, right? So yeah, I guess it seems pretty cut and dry. I don't know.
Well, no, I'm talking about total, someone who mentions 2 committees, I've seen people name all committees, all 5, or however many there are, or maybe 4 of them. They're not expecting to be appointed to every one.
Right.
It isn't the ones they name how many there are. Mr. Eric was appointed to the CAC. That was one of his 2 choices. He was also appointed as an alternate, or I think on one other one.
On the Planning Commission.
Yeah, and you know, subject to his being interested in it, it could very well be that Mr. Eric is happy with the Citizens Advisory Committee and doesn't want 2 appointments, but we don't know that. But at the time when we were discussing it that night, that was in our minds. We recognized that. So I urge the rule not to be whoever names committees that make them automatically that will automatically bump someone else off who was interested, applied late, and was otherwise qualified and interviewed. Just because they name a committee, if they get appointed to one of 2 that they ask for, doesn't mean they really wanted the other one. Not necessarily, anyway. I don't know how to prove that.
That's a complicated rule. I mean, as a guy who's only been here for a year, if a friend comes up to me and asks about this situation, I would have a really hard time. It's impossible. That's why the rule has to be completely made of stone. It's you're late. Because then it looks like we are a bunch of clowns.
Well, not if we're looking for...
If I can't explain the rule, it makes me, that's what, it's, I can't make it more simple than that. It's gotta be that simple. It's gotta be so simple that it takes one sentence to say.
And it should be clear and transparent for everybody who's
Yeah,
applying.
I mean, it
I feel like
sucks.
for my role
It's
is
very unfortunate, but-
multiple times of applying, it's been inconsistent, and I've
Yeah.
had concerns about residency. Do you have to live here if you're a
Yeah.
chair on the
It's-
committee? There's
it's-
many
it's very-
components that need to be
I
refined.
100% agree. And because Tanny is supremely qualified for the position, so it's not like, no one's disagreeing with any of that, but it makes everyone look uncool.
Well, that's why Ray explained it to us at the beginning, before we even started, that we were gonna accept Danny's application. It was 3 minutes late. He had a death in the family. Sorry, Tanny wasn't gonna share that news, but I think I should. Tanny doesn't get paid for anything that he does. He's voted chair of these committees by his peers. The member of the committee he serves on is the person that puts him to the top, because they appreciate Tanny, they trust him, they know he's hardworking. And Ray clarified it before we even started. And this just seems like, if we want to tighten the rules up, we can do that. And I think we're gonna have to at this point. But I think we need to go with, we allowed him to interview. He felt like he got the position. Because the chairs all stay in the room during deliberations when we pick the actual committee members. And it was unanimous to have Tanny on that position. The only alternative would be to not fill that position on budget. We're holding these vacancies open till, what's the date, Ray? December 14th?
Well, we're opening up applications tomorrow, and we're gonna keep them till January 15th, I believe is the date we're gonna keep
So why not
them.
just let him reapply?
Well, because we made a decision that night. We went over this, and you're interpreting the rule differently than I'm interpreting it, but Ray clarified it. Ray has a legal background as a lawyer, clarified it before we did this. Because what we're doing is we've really embarrassed a valued member of our community, and I apologize. Tanny deserves an apology for what just occurred tonight.
You know what,
It should have been handled better than
No,
it
I
was.
disagree with that. This is a complicated issue, and this is not black and white. And there's people interpreting rules, and this is not personal against Tanny. I don't feel like I owe Tanny an apology. I respect Tanny to the utmost, and I think he's a great member.
Okay.
So I don't think that this isn't personal, so let's quit making it personal about Tanny. There's a rule, and the point is, what I'm upset about is, I've had numerous conversations with Ray about this. I'm glad he has a legal background. Ray has told me many times that there is no, you can interpret this thing two different ways. So what we need to do is accept the fact that a couple of people are going to interpret it one way, and a couple of people are going to interpret the other way. And it's okay for us to see the world differently. It's not personal. I'm not going to change how I see this rule. I'm just not. And you guys may not see it either, and I'm fine with that. But I don't owe Tanny an apology. This isn't about Tanny. I don't care if it's anybody. I would do this with absolutely anybody that in this situation. We gave people 3 months to get their applications in. There's a reason why we gave 3 months. So everybody had plenty of time to get it in. And so and this is something that has to be addressed later. An article in the Outlook. Gresham just changed how they do their things. No longer do they allow forever chairs. You get to be a chair twice, two terms. You don't get to be on a committee forever anymore.
That doesn't make it good, just because...
Well, and it doesn't make it bad either.
Gresham's doing it.
And it doesn't make it bad. What I'm saying is cities are changing things. This is a complicated issue. The reason why we're here right now is because the city has failed to have rules that are black and white, and so citizens know what's right from wrong, what they can and can't do. And that's a failure on the city council. So the only way I could make it was black and white. If you're late, you were late. And I could not see, in the way I see the world, any exceptions. You had 90 days to get it in. That's just how I see it. I'm not gonna change other people. You're gonna see the world the way you see it. That's just how I see it. And I know what it's like to go in front of people and do everything right, on time, and how nervous that is when you have to walk into a room. And I don't know any of those people. I don't know if this one person thinks that Tanny's the greatest budget committee chair ever and he would just be honored. I don't know any of that, and I don't think we should speak for that. It's not about any of that. It's about what's right and wrong. You can see it your way, and I can see it my way. We'll vote.
I'll just add, for the hindsight has great benefits, and I will apologize to council if staff had foreseen that we would have another late applicant this year. We would have clarified the rule before we came up this year for the issue. As I indicated before the last meeting, our position was, well, you know, we as opposed to the Canfield year, overall, we had plenty of short applicants as opposed to the year before. And as Ed and I have talked about, city attorney, and I've talked with some of you about, it goes either way. You can either say, well, the late rule had to do with overall, perfectly reasonable, or the late rule had to do with each committee. We'll look at them each separately, and if that committee has insufficient, then we'll take late ones for that committee. And so I'm sorry we didn't foresee and clarify that rule for the council for this year, but as the mayor indicated, Gresham has realized that they have problems too, and even though sometimes we don't like rules, I already have a whole list of issues that we need to codify for this process, so we don't run into this problem and subject good citizens like Mr. Canfield and Mr. Stavenson to this issue. And that's who I feel most worst for, is those two individuals. Because from the staff's point of view, we should have done a better job of interpreting what you meant by late applications, or only consider if we don't have enough for what? Overall or for each committee? And that is our failing, and I apologize, Mr. Mayor, but we won't let it happen again next year, which doesn't solve you this year.
I have a thought. We're very split, and why don't we not appoint the budget committee today and open it up again? It's unfortunate for the ones who already applied, but I mean, let's go through the others, which I don't think are controversial, and I'll withdraw my motion on the budget committee appointments, and let's let the process that Ray started play out, and those who want to serve, those will be three more vacancies that need to be filled. There's still several that need to be filled, and we're doing it anyway, and we're gonna have to interview anyway.
As we have spent some time looking at the state statute, there's really no direction on how the council wants to do it. If you want to reshuffle the deck for the budget committee and do that again, that can happen too, because we have to already have interviews for other committees also anyway. We're still going to do it anyway, so if we just do one more committee, we do one more committee. It's not going to make any more work for you.
If it's legal to do, I think we should do that. I think we should get the best people. I think if they have to reapply, we get the date out there. They reapply, everybody's on time, we start fresh, and then we appoint the right people, the people that were on there. I think that's the most fair way, and that gets us out of any sort of cronyism, favoritism, or anything.
Yeah, we will. Anybody who's applied has already applied. We won't make them reapply.
Okay, so we just redo it from the, and is everybody okay with that?
I am.
Is the motion that we accept citizens advisory through planning as they are in toto
I think we're gonna
tonight?
go,
That will be the
yeah.
next motion, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't think anything else was an issue. And so I think that we do that.
Okay.
Jamie, you go.
I kind of want to hear from Mr. Canfield, because I feel as though it is very important that you were able to come back to us tonight and speak on it, and I value your opinion.
Okay, I think you're fair.
Thank you, councilors, for asking me to speak again. I like that proposal, do it over for the budget committee applications. I think there's a set of facts that no one will ever agree on. How about just for the budget committee only? That's a good idea, just do a do-over.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. That helps me make my decision.
Yeah, and thank you, Robert. And I think you guys, what we learned here tonight is we got conflict on council because we were put into a tough situation. And I'm sure many of us have been lobbied this week. And I've been lobbied by very smart people who see it my way, and you've probably been lobbied by very smart people to see it your way. There's no way, so we need to make it very clear, we don't want future counselors to get here again. It's not fair for our citizens, it's not fair for any of that. So I agree that this is the most fair way to do it. We clean it up, we have goal setting coming up, I think that should be part of it. And then Ray and I talked today about appointing us a couple of people to, Ray being included, to come up with some stuff and then vet it through the CAC and then bring it to council. So next year, it's more clear, everybody knows, because we've done this 2 years in a row, we can't do this again. Because that's a failure of leadership if we go here again.
This question is likely to come up, so let me cut it off right now. And there's a rule, an ordinance that says that if no qualified successor to a committee appointee has been appointed as of December 31st, the existing member's term shall continue until the member's successor is appointed and qualified. So the existing budget committee will continue as it currently sits until you decide otherwise.
Yep,
Okay.
works for me. And again, like I said, this wasn't personal about anything, but
That's good to hear.
when it's not, and when we have to remember that we are elected to do what's right and wrong, black and white. It's not about personalities. It doesn't matter if you like somebody or don't like somebody. We have to do what's right for our citizens. And so if we are not given the right tools to do that, then we put ourselves into a lot of issues, right? And we don't ever want to have a council seen as cronyism, favoritism, and that. And that's what that tonight was about, protecting the process and the citizens and us from doing the right thing. So even though it creates a little controversy once in a while, we got to the right place, so.
So Tanny's the acting chair, he would remain in that position?
Nothing's changing right now.
Okay, good.
Until we open it up, and then we'll do all this.
There are no meetings in January,
Yeah,
but.
but the point is,
Why didn't we just say that in the first place?
I think the point is I think we're gonna get to where we wanna get, but we have to do it in the way that's right. Then we can all lay our heads on the pillow at night and know we did it right.
With then,
go for it, you go
no,
first.
I was going to withdraw my motion and make one, but I'll leave it to you.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that we want to encourage healthy leadership as well as with what you're saying. So I really want to make sure that, you know, we are hopefully soliciting to other people and encouraging them to want to participate. And when they see debacles like this, it's probably like a, no, I don't really want to be with you people. I don't want to participate. So it doesn't give us a good diversity of thought. So it's my
Last thing we want.
That is my priority for council goals, and it has been from even before I started. So I'll be looking forward to a lot of different factors that you guys have already identified. I'm sure I could sit here talking forever, but we have other things to do. So yeah, I just want to make sure everybody also recognizes that we do value the leadership, the tenure, the time you served on council, Camfield, the dedication that Tanny's put in for so many years, and we value our citizens. So that's all I want to say.
And as a matter of procedure, thank you, Mr. Wilcox, for bringing me the motions piece of the ordinance that does come in handy. I have my own copy, but thank you for it. So, says a motion may be withdrawn by the mover at any time without the consent of council, so Councilor Ripma can withdraw.
I withdraw the motion I made, whenever that was, the last motion I made.
2 hours ago.
And if you'll entertain, I don't know if you want to invite any further public comment before we move on this. If not, I am prepared to move the appointment of the Citizens Advisory Committee, position number 2, David Wheaton, position number 3, Timothy Eric, position number 4, Alexander Lumiere, position number 5, Shelley Reynolds, alternate Heidi Hinshaw.
Second.
Roll call, any discussion? Are we good? Okay, Sarah?
Counselor Ripma?
Yes.
Counselor Kranz?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Moon?
Yes.
Counselor Hudson?
Yes.
Want me to keep going?
Yep.
Historic Landmarks Commission. I move appointment to position number 2, Aaron Janssens, and position number 3, Sharon Nesbitt.
Second.
All right, Sarah?
Counselor Ripma?
Yes.
Counselor Kranz?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Moon?
Yes.
Counselor Hudson?
Yes.
For the Parks Advisory Committee, I move appointment of the following: position number 2, Shelley Reynolds; position number 4, James Gertison; position number 5, Natalie Rasmussen; position number 6, David Wheaton. Other two.
Second.
All right.
Counselor Whitma?
Yes.
Counselor Kranz?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Moon?
Yes.
Counselor Hudson?
Yes.
And to the Planning Commission, position number 6, Tanny Stephenson; position number 7, Sandy Glantz; alternate Timothy Eric.
Second.
Sarah?
Counselor Whitma?
Yes.
Counselor Kranz?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Moon?
Yes.
Counselor Hudson?
Yes.
That it? Well, that's it. Well, I will say, in all fairness, it took us 3 years to have any type of conflict in our meeting, but we got there. But
was
the
good,
truth
though.
is,
We
but
resolved
it wasn't too bad. But the truth is, you guys, if we don't do things and we don't have proper procedures and policies in place, it creates this kind of stuff. And we got to make sure that we're doing things so we don't get to this point, because it creates a lot of tension and a lot of stuff, and it comes out sometimes. So I'm
Agreed.
glad that we got to where we're at. So, okay, cool. Let's move on. Resolutions, agenda item number 6 is a resolution amending section 7 parts of the fees and charges schedule adopted by resolution 1954, amended by resolution 2040. Fred and Tim, will you please come up?
And if I direct council to Exhibit A to agenda item number 6, that is probably the most important information you want to see, is the existing and the proposed changes in the rental fees. So I'll get them there, gentlemen, so that you could take it off.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. Tonight, we bring before you a draft resolution to amend the parks fees and changes. And I have Mr. Tim Siri here, who is the city's parks superintendent, to discuss the fees and charges and answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on the proposed Exhibit
Well,
A?
I do not, but
I thought it was good. Numbers look good, in my opinion. I think the increases were proper.
I was hoping to see, like, what's the rental, is it declining? Is it increasing, like on the Sam Cox building?
I haven't seen any change on the building. I've seen a different clientele using the building.
Is there a reason for, is it like costing us more that we have to raise it by $300 for a full day, from 600 to 900?
Well, it's a cost recovery, and if you look at all the communities I surveyed back in 2015, we're still coming in well below what is currently reality with all the other cities that I surveyed. So I'm trying to, like the mayor said, I'm trying to come in midship, not overcharging people, but to recoup funds for events that are usually anywhere from 75 to 80% are non-residents that use our facilities in Troutdale because of the cost differentiation. If that, you follow that? Did that answer your question, Glenn?
Yeah, it does. I'm concerned that we're gonna end up with no usage over there with these, those are the ones that concern me the most. The Sam Cox increase, I think, seems pretty high, because we just raised it not too long ago. And
I thought that we haven't adjusted these fees in over 8 years. No?
Sam Cox one, and I think we vetted it through the Citizens Advisory last time too, and we got some feedback from them, because that's something that's really intimate
Oh, yes.
to the community, and I'd rather see higher volume and more usage than trying to recoup costs by raising it to the point where we don't get anybody using it.
Right.
And on the picnic shelters too, if we raise that too much, like the $80 increase, what they tend to do is just move further into the park and use the free ones or whatever, instead of like the designated shelter area. And I know we have 2 new shelters up by Imagination Station. Are we gonna charge for those as well?
Yes, we're charging for the new one we have.
How much is that?
Same fee as the other one.
Okay. All right.
Hasn't changed.
That's all I have. I'd rather see volume and
Right.
more use for the community. 'cause
We
it's
have that.
It's a great service.
We do have volume.
So on the picnic shelters one, this is something that we talked about offline after we began this discussion. And I kind of had said that from my experience, let's just say for my event that I was hosting, I'd reserved it, I'm just going to throw these numbers out, from 10 to 2. So I could have my event for 2 hours and have like a cleanup and a takedown over the 4-hour period. And when I looked at the agenda for the day, there was, you know, you have shelter A and B, or B and A, and there was another group that had rented it from 2 to 6. So I thought, oh, great, we won't really overlap. But they were there hours before I was, preparing in terms of the decorations and the elaborate balloons and the everything that they were doing. So I'm wondering, in that situation, would they be charged the $20 for additional hours? Because their event might be from 2 to 6, but they've been there since probably like 8 or 9 a.m. getting it prepared.
I would not have known.
I know, and it's kind of one of those things like, sorry.
It's like parking enforcement
Totally.
at Meadow Park. I mean, it's just kind of the same thing as
Yeah.
how is that enforced?
Yeah.
That's why the power of your permit, you know, ensues that.
Yeah.
That if people, oh, I was here first, and you come up with the permit, you
Yeah.
can tell them all your right to move away. If they get
Yeah.
in your way, you call the police, and they'll have them escorted out.
I think to avoid police coming, I think we probably need to check our permit applications to make sure there's a notice on there that you don't get to come a minute sooner because there may be a person right before you.
And that's kind of the thing.
Let them know there is no pre-time, probably. is
If you
important.
need additional hours, identify.
You can ask for them,
You can-
yeah.
I mean, that's what the note is the $20 for additional. So kind of just making it a little bit more clear, like your 4 hours includes your setup and your takedown.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's too annoying.
Tim will make a note to make
know.
sure that he checks those apps to make sure there's adequate notice that if you're asking for 2 o'clock, you mean 2 o'clock, you
Yeah.
don't mean 1 o'clock.
Or 8:30.
Yeah, you can't have it early
Yeah.
unless you ask for it.
That would be I mean, basically,
Yeah.
the people were using it for a full day, but you're only doing a half day
Well, we had an
charge,
event one
so-
time where some people came in with white tablecloths, and there's 120 people that just set up in the grass.
Oh,
And
yeah.
really, you can't tell them
Totally,
no,
yeah,
you know, but
Yeah.
it was a nice setup.
yeah, yeah.
They did.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, I know there's lots of usage. I hear all the time that people can't believe they can get what they get for that amount of money. It seems to be way lower than a lot of places. And as salaries have gone up,
Oh, yeah.
benefits gone up. We have people that are working for the city that we gotta recoup these costs.
This was
So-
really hard to do because we have such beautiful cities around us, all with their own unique facilities. One city, I'm not gonna mention the name, but they charge $165 an hour for a room that's half the size of ours, plus a $50 application fee.
Yeah.
We're way below market.
Oh,
Way-
sure.
Even with this, we're still way
You know, I
below.
don't wanna be a profiteer.
Yep.
But we do.
I don't think we have any problems with, I mean, we're fine.
Okay. Fred?
Oh, I have no comments.
All right, well, I guess we're gonna move forward.
Shall we move adoption?
Are we gonna review it again, or is this the final?
I think this is it, man.
This
We
was it, I thought.
Vote on it and move forward, yeah. All right, can get entertain a motion, anybody?
Well, we might invite public comment.
Yeah, I mean, normally someone will raise their hand if I'm looking for people, but
We'll open for,
anybody want to talk on this? Okay, all right.
I move adoption of a resolution amending Section 7 Parks of the Fees and Charges Schedule adopted by Resolution 1954 and amended by Resolution 2040.
Second?
Roll call, please, Sarah?
Counselor Rittman?
Yes.
Counselor Kranz?
yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor White?
No.
Counselor Moon?
Yes.
Counselor Hudson?
Yes.
Passes. Cool. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, could I just have a request? Could we start tracking the usage? Like, if you could go back last year at the lower fee, and then I'd like to keep an eye on that.
Yes, no.
For the shelters, for everything that was on this sheet.
And if we see, you know, occupancy diminish, we can talk about maybe in a year, you know, lowering it.
Yeah. And then maybe, you know, have CAC look at it too in the
Sure.
future on
No,
that
no.
particular one, since they've kind of done that as part of their duties, so.
Yep.
Sorry I didn't catch it sooner.
No, no, I respect
Suggested
that,
it
Glenn.
sooner.
Yeah, and sorry for bringing it up too, but, you know, just now, I apologize, we're after the vote point, but specifically on the seasonal youth and adult leagues, where it's quite a bigger jump, that might be something that we kind of keep a close eye on.
Are you talking about the charge for $500?
Yep, exactly.
That is because we have a very aggressive adult league that, really, they are classic players.
Okay.
And they literally.
You're talking about the soccer field? That, the $100 is a joke. $500 is still.
Spend that much.
That field is busy all Sunday, and it's getting tore up. They're getting a heck of a deal.
Spend that much on fertilizer.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly, and that's why it's closed till May 5th.
Doesn't bother me.
It helps me feel nice.
And I know it's an increase for the little leagues, but they'll be fine. It's $100.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's looking great over there, by the way. I love the improvements that were made to the Sam Cox building.
Oh, yeah, we're trying to take care of
There's some really nice events have been occurring over there.
I like the painted pillars too. Those are fun.
Yeah, those are nice.
Yep, kept it original.
Thank you,
What you
Tim.
guys wanted.
Thanks, Tim.
Great job, Tim. Thank you. All right, agenda item number 7, a discussion on election reform, including continuation on STAR Voting, discussion from November 11th, 2019 meeting. Mr. Wilcox and Council Hudson, and maybe guests.
Right.
I don't know if they're gonna do that.
Okay.
I get the other TV too, or?
Shrink that so the whole chart shows.
Sorry, I'm not sure how to do
One more shrink. It's hard to see now.
That looks like you got it all, though.
Maybe you could just put it like half. I don't need the entire chart, maybe just half, the bottom, either top or bottom half.
Try and go this way. For now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Better?
I handed out copies of the slides, so you don't really need to take your next,
Okay, this is the same, you're just saying that your presentation is the same as the sheet?
Yeah.
Okay.
the sheets are what's on the screen. Okay, first I'll explain what the chart is. The far left column is obviously election years. Then across the top you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the number of candidates per council seat or position. So the X, each X is represents a council seat or position. So in, let's see, 78, for example, I should say, the reason I went all the way back to 78 is that's the first year that Troutdale had elect by position for councilors. Before that, it was top 3. So in 78, for example, you had 1 unopposed candidate for the position, and under column 2, that represents you had 2 positions with 2 candidates each. And so to kind of backtrack to how we got to that point, why it was different in 78 versus 76. There was a charter amendment in November 76. I'm going to go ahead and read the the ballot language, or just the question and explanation. Question, shall members of the City of Troutdale Council be elected by position? Explanation. Under the present City of Troutdale Charter, everyone seeking a position on the council runs at large, each against all the others. The 3 candidates who receive the most votes are elected. If amended as proposed, each candidate would run for one of the 3 open positions as he or she may choose. For example, if a candidate wanted to challenge the councilman holding position number 2, he would file for that position. Each council position would be elected separately. Okay. Now, I think when the voters approved this, there were some unforeseen consequences, which are actually pretty well represented in column 1, where you've got a whole slew of unopposed candidates, which wasn't happening prior to 78, unless you had only three applicants for 3 positions, then there's not much you can do about that. But under top 3, as long as you got 4 candidates, you get to select which 3 of those you want. Also, the way this amendment was proposed, it says, talks about challenging the councilman. So that's implying that you've got an incumbent running. About a third of the time, in all these elections between 78 and now, about a third of the time, there wasn't a incumbent running. And also, it works out to about, averages out to about 5 candidates per election, which means, on average, every election, there's going to be 1 candidate running unopposed. Every 2 elections, 2 candidates running unopposed. So at any one time, on average, you're going to have 2 councilors, sitting councilors, who have run unopposed, for which the voters have no choice whether they were in there or not. Let's see. And okay, now I want to kind of elaborate on how we end up with unopposed candidates. 2 main reasons: lack of candidates, not enough candidates. You saw that in the most recent election, actually. In 2018, we had 5 candidates total. So somebody was going to run unopposed no matter what. And the other problem you have is distribution of candidates. We had a candidate distribution of 3-1-1. So you had 2 candidates unopposed in that case. You had a more extreme example in 2010 where you had 8 candidates. You'd think with 8 candidates you'd cover all the positions. You could have had a 3-3-2 distribution, could have even had a 4-2-2 distribution. What you ended up with was a 2-1-5 distribution. So even with 8 candidates, somebody still ran unopposed. Okay. So the whole top 3 versus elect by position, I've covered that extensively in the past. I'm sure Dave's totally sick of hearing about it. So I'm going to move on a bit to, I'm going to quote from the Lake Oswego city charter, because it covers this and also some other reforms that I'm going to be referring to later. Under councilors, at each general election, 3 councilors shall be elected, each for a term of 4 years. The 3 shall be elected without respect to position or area, and the 3 candidates who receive the 3 greatest number of votes cast for such candidates are elected to the council. If 1 or more vacancies on the council, other than mayor, are being filled at a general election pursuant to Section 31 of this charter, the vacant office or offices shall be filled by the person or persons receiving the next greatest number of votes. The term of office of each counselor continues for the term for which the counselor is elected or appointed. And there's a reference to term limits. No counselor, including those serving on July 1, 1980, may be elected to a city office or any combination of such offices for a period to exceed 8 consecutive years. Then there's a separate section 10, counselor resignation required to run for mayor. Any counselor, including those serving on July 1, 1980. So this, all of these charter references for Lake Oswego, they're all effective 1980. Any counselor who seeks election to the office of mayor during the first 2 terms of his or her term shall, upon filing of acceptance of nomination for the office, file an irrevocable resignation from the office of counselor held, which is to carry an effective date of no later than the 1st of the next January. No person may simultaneously run for the offices of both mayor and counselor. Okay, now I need to get to my other my other slide. Okay. So I can kind of scroll up and down there.
That's too small.
Is there a way I can scroll?
Just
Okay, we'll just go through these one by one. Top 3 voting for counselors. It's by far the most common practice in the state of Oregon. I also found out most recently the city of Rogue River, I've known this for a long time, back in 1998, they switched from elect by position to top 3 based on a council submitted charter amendment. That was in 1998. I just recently, out of curiosity, looked into what the vote on that was. They switched from elect by position to top 3. They favored top 3 by 79%, 79 to 21% in favor of top 3. I haven't researched as to how long they were doing vote by position or how long they had top 3 prior to vote by position. Term limits. As I read in Lake Oswego, they have pretty strict term limits there. 2 consecutive terms for 4 years each, either 2 years of mayor, 2 years of counselor, or one each. They're pretty restrictive in Lake Oswego. I wanted to mention what's happened when term limits came to the ballot for voters in the area. November 16, there was a citizen initiative for term limits. The Tualatin limit is 12 or 3 terms within a 20-year period, so 12 years within a 20-year period. That was approved by the voters, margin of 2 to 1. The Tualatin Council did everything they could think of to keep that off the ballot. The initiative prevailed, and you can see the voters highly favored the term limits that were proposed. And then in November 15, Tigard Council was essentially requesting the voters extend their term limits, and those would have applied to the existing counselors. So they were basically asking counselors to, or the voters to give them another 4 years. Voters turned them down pretty substantially, 79 to 21%. So, sometimes, you ask the voters, you might not get the answer you want. Resign to run. That's an interesting one. This was proposed by a subcommittee of the Troutdale Council a while back, and didn't go anywhere. Tigard Council tried to, they asked the voters to get rid of it. The voters decided to keep it. In the case of Tigard, well, Lake Oswego is the first place I saw this. As far as I know, Tigard and Lake Oswego are the only two cities that I'm aware of that have resigned to run. There could be more, but I haven't run across any others. I went back 20-some years in Lake Oswego and couldn't find an example of any counselor resigning to run midterm. In Tigard, however, I discovered that their current mayor actually resigned his council seat to run. He was elected to council in 2012, re-elected in 2016. So in 2018, when the mayor's cycle opened up, he ran for mayor, but he had to resign as councilor to run midterm, and he was elected mayor of Tigard. Okay, two-year term for mayor. It's interesting to find out where these things came from. In Troutdale, in 1994, there was a complete rewrite of the 1942 charter. The current charter is the 1994 charter. And one of the suggested changes for that charter was to go from a 2-year term to a 4-year term for mayor. At the time, it wasn't unanimously supported. As a matter of fact, the council at the time was divided 3-3, whether going from a 2-year term to a 4-year term for mayor would be included in that charter change. And it just so happens that also at the time, the mayor only voted when there was a tie on council. So if it was a 4-2 vote, the mayor didn't even get involved in a vote. But since this was a 3-3, the mayor ended up deciding that the 4-year term would go on the on that charter amendment. The problem with that was that this was a complete rewrite of the charter, so the voters couldn't pick and choose which changes were included. They had to take all of it or none of it. And there was one of those 3 opposing counselors that actually wrote a argument against the charter because she was so opposed to switching from 2 years to 4 years. So it's in the charter now since 1994 because it was included in that change, wholesale change. Also at the time, let's see. Okay. Actually, let me back up to a 2-year term. Number 4 and 5, these were also suggested as changes in 2010. There was a charter amendment in 2010 to clarify the roles of the mayor versus the city manager. And these 2 ideas were also being considered, or it was being considered to switch back from 4-year term for mayor to a 2-year term. And also the idea of a council-appointed mayor, as they do in Wood Village, for example, rather than a voter-elected mayor. Reading the minutes from that time, I discovered somebody made a reference to, well, they've had a council-appointed mayor in Bend forever. So I checked in to see where Bend stands now and found out in May of 18, there was a charter review committee that suggested asking the voters whether they wanted to vote for their mayor or not, or whether they wanted to let the council keep picking from among themselves. And you can see the results were voters chose the option of electing their own mayor, 74 to 26%. And then this last one, I just kind of threw in there to reduce the number of councilors from 6 to 4. Tigard, for example, has 3 times the population of Troutdale, but they have a council of only a mayor and 4 councilors. The reason this makes sense is, as I was saying a while back, if you've only got an average of 5 candidates running per election and going to a 4-council board, you can fill up those 4 positions without anybody running unopposed. So I think that's about it. Any questions? I've got got spreadsheets if anybody is curious about past elections, who ran against who, how many ran in each election. But it pretty much covers it for me.
It was good information, Paul. Thank you. Hey, Councilor Hudson, are you going up front?
We're not presenting together, so yes, but I was going to show a PowerPoint.
Oh,
having
okay.
to do, picking back up with STAR voting.
Perfect.
Which was the other thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. We're picking back up with the question of STAR voting, which we had discussed previously and we're adding to today. And I'd also like to thank Clay and Annie for being here. They are our election science experts, and so if you have technical questions, they have great information on it, but they're here as a resource if you have further questions after this. But I wanted to take this opportunity to bring back up the topic which last month I was urging you to consider to refer to the voters of Troutdale. When we were discussing that, some questions came up about why we would need a system like this, like STAR voting, what good it would do. There were questions such as, well, we haven't had a problem before, so why would we need this? Or exactly what is this trying to fix? And that's what I wanted to address today. So we have our holiday movie coming up, and as you know, in a multi-candidate race, ELF won out. Recently, the poll was conducted on Facebook, but we've chosen ELF to be played at the Reynolds High School multipurpose building, and cocoa and pretzels will be available too. Let's say we had a 2-movie runoff for what should be shown, and the choices were ELF and A Bad Mom's Christmas as our other holiday option. And let's see how people voted. Out of, let's say, 9 people, if 5 voted for ELF and 4 voted for Bad Mom's Christmas, we would have no trouble saying that ELF is clearly the favorite. Although some people wanted Bad Mom's Christmas, ELF has not only more voters in favor of it, but a majority of voters in favor of it. More people want ELF than any other option as well, which is important. Consider what happens if someone adds the Polar Express. Now, we shouldn't object to anyone adding the Polar Express. It's a great holiday movie. The 4 people who wanted a Bad Mom's Christmas, for whatever reason, are sticking with their choice. But what happens is that 2 people who wanted ELF said, oh, Polar Express, good, oh yeah, I'll have that one. 3 people stick with ELF, and now a Bad Mom's Christmas is coming to our Troutdale movie night. And everyone looks around and says, wait, how did this happen? Clearly, most people don't want a Bad Mom's Christmas, and yet that wins. And under current Troutdale election laws, if this were a candidate, this would win an election to city council. Bad Mom's Christmas would. So this leaves the voters, so the people who were voting for Polar Express think, sure, Polar Express is my favorite, but I'd really prefer ELF to Bad Mom's. their second choice matters. If we only go first past the post voting, which is what we have now, we completely discount second choices. And in this case, you can see second choices are really important. They were told to vote for what they wanted, they voted for Polar Express, and they got Bad Moms Christmas. They did not get what they really would have liked, which is, sure, I'll go see Elf. Much better than Bad Moms Christmas. This leaves people thinking, well, I shouldn't be voting then. Not only did my vote not matter, my vote just ruined everything. Because I voted for for the movie I truly wanted. This also leaves the Polar Express as a candidate thinking I shouldn't even have run. This will discourage people from suggesting movies if our goal in this case is to keep out Bad Moms Christmas. Other movie candidates are going to say, gosh, don't suggest going away from Elf, because who knows what'll happen then. We'll get a rotten candidate who wins. These are the problems, and I'm sure you can extend this to candidates running for office. These are the problems that we currently face with our first past the post system. You may say that the imaginary scenario I've just constructed doesn't actually happen because it's fictitious and purely hypothetical. But disasters like this do happen. Taking from an article on different election methods published on Vox.com only last year, I'd like to quote from the article there. One of Hamlin's favorite examples of the failures of first past the post voting was the 1991 Louisiana gubernatorial election. There was a moderate candidate, widely liked Democratic incumbent Governor Buddy Roemer. Among the other candidates were the notoriously corrupt Democrat Edward Edwins, later sentenced to a decade in federal prison for racketeering, and former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke, a Republican. Roemer did overwhelmingly better than Edwards in head-to-head polling. Roemer also did overwhelmingly better than Duke in head-to-head polling, but he lost to both of them in the three-way open primary, so the general election was between a racketeer and a white supremacist, even though the electorate of Louisiana preferred Roemer over either of them, according to Hamlin. So because of vote splitting in this case, the candidate who would be everyone's clear second choice lost and couldn't be anyone's choice because of the way the votes were divided, because we didn't consider anything except people's top choices, which was not the most equitable or sensible way of considering what people's preferences is. If the point of an election is really to find out what the voters want, we have to consider more than their first choice, because we're talking about people, and people want more than, people don't want an all or nothing thing. They have preferences, and that's something we have to consider. This is my first point, that people have preferences beyond yes or no. A good voting system must allow for better and worse, and that's what STAR voting does. You also have to ask what the real purpose of a vote is. I would suggest that the real purpose of a vote is not finding the candidate who most people put as first, but finding the candidate who most people think would do a better job than the other available candidates, even if that candidate would not have won the most first choice votes. If that candidate can win the broad consent of the people, that's the best representative. You also have to ask who makes the best leader in this case, and I believe in this case it would be the same. Someone who can command broad support, who can command a majority of voters' support, is the person we want in that position. The person most likely to seek consensus, the person least likely to be divisive. Yes, as we've discussed. And I would suggest that it's the candidate who most people can agree on would make the best leader. One of the objections to STAR voting that came up while we were discussing it earlier is that it seemed too complicated. But think of all the other ways that we use preference scoring in our everyday lives. We use this constantly with product reviews. We don't say, did you like this product, yes or no? We say, how much did you like this product? That's exactly what score voting and by extension STAR voting is asking voters to do. Rank these candidates, or not rank these candidates, but rate these candidates. We do that all the time, and it's not complicated. We use this for like customer feedback and product feedback. From strongly agree to strongly disagree, where do you fall on the scale? It's a completely natural and normal thing that we do. It would not confuse people to extend this into an election. We're very used to it already. I'd like to bring up top three voting. which Paul has just talked about. And the reason I'd like to consider it tonight is that a question has been raised about whether star voting and top 3 voting are compatible. The fact is that they're perfectly compatible. If we decided to go forward with top 3 voting and or star, both could exist independently and both could exist with each other. If we were to offer both of these to the citizens of Troutdale, we could offer them as 2 separate questions to be decided, and whichever way citizens voted, for one, for the other, for both, or for neither, would all be completely compatible. So we don't have to worry about one messing with the other. Because these questions are before us, I wanted to also speak in favor of top 3 voting. I know we talked about this last year, or was it 2 years ago? But this is, I think, worth pursuing, and I'd like to talk about why. Right now, since city councilors don't represent districts, we have to ask why we actually elect them to specific seats. We need a good reason for doing so. Keeping separate races actually limits voter choice. Separate races make races less competitive, and separate races encourage rivalry and negativity. Because when you challenge someone, it must be seen as an attack electorally. Whereas people frequently want to participate in a situation like a city council and want the voters to pick who the best person is without calling out a specific candidate and saying, I'm coming for you, right? That's going to create bad blood for a long time, and it's not necessary. In many previous cases, someone has run for a seat without a specific objection to them. Let's see. Well, yes, for example, yes, not to go yet, but yes, Councillor Kranz is indicating that she ran for her current seat, not for a policy difference with Councillor who was currently the incumbent. And so there's no specific reason why a challenger should have to pick an opponent. It does encourage rivalry and negativity, though. Here are scenarios that we end up facing quite a lot in Troutdale. Let's say we have 3 incumbents. One challenger has to select a seat to run for. But this means that the voters don't get to pick the top 3 that they would prefer. This is the challenger now forcing a choice on the voters, whereas the voters are stuck with B and stuck with C. They can only pick A or D. And they couldn't make up, for instance, A, D, and B as their preference for who they would like to see on council. So voter choice is limited. Scenario 2 that we frequently get is many people running for one seat while someone else remains unchallenged. This imbalance, I think, also doesn't present good choices to voters, and prevents them from making a choice such as, well, what if A, D, and E are the people I want? Even if you have multiple challengers for multiple seats, this is still not ideal. First, you have an increased likelihood of forming coalitions, which some people object to and think doesn't make for good city government. But once again, you have voter choice limited. You can only choose A, E, C. You could not choose A, D, B, even if that's who you really, really wanted. Finally, what you frequently get when you have an open seat, as we've seen in previous situations, is all the challengers file for the open seat. The incumbents receive no challenge, and so you only get one new person. And again, you're stuck with a situation where you have 5 people for one open seat, unless we had star voting, which would help in this situation. Otherwise, you end up with someone winning with 20 or 30% of the vote, which is not representative of the majority's will. So in each of these scenarios, voters are not free to pick their 3 favorite candidates. Candidates themselves get to decide what the lineup is, not voters, and races are often imbalanced. If we had 6 people running for 3 seats under the current system, there could only be 8 different ways voters could choose who wins. If we simply had 6 candidates and said pick 3, there are actually 20 different combinations that voters could choose, which gives them more choice and lets them have who they actually want on council. We've discussed already that STAR can absolutely work with top 3 voting. The two don't conflict with each other at all. You could have one or the other or both. Which is why I'm suggesting tonight, since this is the second night that now that we're considering this, I would like to refer toward the voters in November, not May. I would like to refer to them the option to adopt star voting, and I'd like to refer to them the option to adopt top 3 voting, and I'd like neither of them to be contingent upon the other, but simply options that the voters can choose. Thank you. Shall I return to my seat for a discussion? Stay here in the hot seat while people are throwing things at me. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, just a quick question. So
Yes.
if we refer it to the ballot on November, will we also have the option to just keep it how it is?
Right, so star would be a yes or no.
Yeah.
Top 3 would be a yes or no.
Okay.
Voters could choose no and no, and their will would be known.
But they might be confused and think, well, what about how it already is, or how, I mean, what, so I guess like an ultimatum, perhaps.
Not if we write the voting statement correctly.
Can't we rate our choices 1, 2, and 3?
Are them, right? Yeah.
In both of these cases, they're binary yes/no choices, which,
Yeah.
but again, it fits the spirit of it because it's not a pick one of the two, it's pick whichever option you want, which is really what I'm about anyway.
The city council should not refer these. And as much as I respect Zach, and I know he's got the best interests of Troutdale at heart, here is why I think it should be done by the people. People in Troutdale have the right to petition to change the charter. And they have that right, and they can exercise it, and it will look better even for your position if it comes from a petition from the people. If it comes from us, I challenge top 3 voting. I've gone at length on that, and I won't focus on it, but I am confident that I would have been elected each time I was elected had it been top 3 voting. Because of name recognition, all of us incumbents benefit from a system like that. I feel the public perception, it should come from the people. Now, Paul Wilcox went around the city trying to get people to sign a petition for it, and they didn't want it. With star voting,
I'll answer.
No,
Paul,
look,
I'll answer.
you got 600 signatures, or you didn't get enough, or maybe you didn't have enough help. I'm sorry, but he could not gather enough signatures. Let me put it that way. I am interpreting as that they didn't want to make that change. I don't think it's a good change either. I've always been against it, but mostly because of accountability. The reason, if someone's doing a bad job, or someone thinks they're doing a bad job, you can run for that seat and try to get them out. With top 3 voting, all you can do is run and hope that you and your colleagues make that person come in 4th. With 3 votes up, it's very hard to make a counselor accountable to the voters in a system like that. And I just think it's not as good. That's why we made the change away from that. But for star voting, the same argument applies. It should come by a petition circulated in Troutdale from the people, because I suggest that we would have the same, we incumbents, if you are worried about incumbents getting reelected, would have the same advantage in star voting because of name recognition. I also say that just on principle, changes like this should come from petition by the people. In the case of star voting, if you think about it, I looked it up a month ago when this came up before, and there's a big committee that, well-funded, promoting this. I don't know how well-funded, but they've got pages of donors. And I didn't check this meeting for this meeting, but they've got pages of donors. And they might have the resources to circulate the petition in Troutdale, trying to convince people to sign up for it. Good luck. you know, it's a confusing system, but it's possible that they might have a chance. But the biggest donor in STAR Voting has the name Frohnmeyer, and I assume it's Dave Frohnmeyer's son or something. I don't know. Is that right? Was it Dave Frohnmeyer? Was, if you can cast your mind back 15 years or whenever it was a popular Republican candidate who was aced out of the race, and we ended up with Barbara Roberts as a minority elected governor because a third party, right-wing Al Mobley, filed and siphoned votes away. Okay, this, frankly, STAR Voting would work if everyone voted 1, 2, 3, but if everyone just voted for their first choice only and didn't vote 1, 2, 3, it might not have even fixed the problem, but I'll leave that aside. I'll just say that the STAR Voting is a fix for a third-party insurgency like that. That is not Troutdale's problem. That does not deal with the issue of that Paul and you both see of having unopposed candidates. STAR Voting has not been adopted anywhere. I guess it's maybe being promoted in Eugene, and they are welcome, without the council intervening, to circulate petitions in Troutdale and try to get it on the ballot. But I don't think the council should adopt it unless we think it's a good idea, which I do not. I do not think it's a good idea. And I'll just say, lastly, I mean, it replaces democracy with sort of a game show method of selection that voting is a very important process, and people focus on it. And frankly, asking people to pick 1, 2, 3 third choices, there's been studies in other voting systems that are similar where people don't actually rank all the candidates all the way down. And what happens is their vote gets discarded if their candidate that they did vote for gets thrown out in an earlier round. And they don't ever get to vote again. So no system is perfect. I'm not saying our system is perfect, but I am saying I recommend that the council not put these on the ballot by our motion. I think it would look bad. I think it would be unfortunate, and I don't agree with doing it, and encourage citizens who want it to go ahead and petition for it. We have nothing to do with it then.
May I respond?
Yes, of
All
course.
right. If the notion that first past the vote voting is democracy, whereas STAR Voting is a game show, is your contention, then you have to ask, well, what are we really trying to do with democracy? Are we trying to establish whoever can win, or are we trying to get information from the voters about who they want? If democracy means letting the voters choose who best suits them, then we have to support STAR Voting because it does a better job than first past the post of satisfying voters about what they want, and this has been shown in multiple studies.
A better job? How can you prove that? In
Okay.
voting?
Okay.
Game shows, yes, but
Though I hate to use the word game because it uses the word game again, there are game theory simulations done by powerful computers who can test contentions like, let's say the voters want this and this is how they vote, which system satisfies these criteria that we have for what make a strong democracy, such as does it establish a winner that most people are generally happy with, even though it's not their first. I'm not going to keep going with this. I'm going to let Clay and Annie respond to that if they want to. But I'm convinced that it does a better job based on not only simulations that have been run, but live runs, I suppose, as well. That if what you want to do is represent what the people want, this does a better job. It's true that not every system is perfect, but systems can definitely be better than others. And a system in which a moderate loses out to a criminal and a white supremacist is not an ideal version. Now, STAR voting is not specifically to stop a third-party insurgency. In fact, it welcomes third parties because there's not going to be this spoiler effect. Because it reduces the spoiler effect, it invites third parties and it invites people to vote their true conscience of who they want for a third party, instead of saying, oh gosh, I better vote for the lesser of two evils. That sounds like democracy to me, and that's one of the reasons I support STAR. I'd like to mention a couple other things. Paul Wilcox did try to circulate a petition. He is an individual of integrity, and he did not approach any doors that had a no soliciting sign. This was a very good thing of him. There are fewer doors that don't have a no soliciting sign in Troutdale than the total number that he would need to get signatures if he went to all of them, because almost every door has a no soliciting sign, which was probably there when you bought the house. For this reason, he did not get enough signatures, but the vast, vast majority, and he can quote you the percentage of people he spoke to, supported this. That is to say, if we took the people he spoke to as a representative sample, they overwhelmingly did want top 3 voting. The final thing I'll say is that my purpose in supporting top 3 voting has nothing to do with unseating incumbents. It's for incumbents to be voted on by the people without running unchallenged. That's the problem I see. If incumbents are doing a good job, this is why I'm against term limits. If incumbents are doing a good job, keep them, but let the voters choose to keep them. What you said about not being able to choose your opponent in order to challenge them directly, that is something I want. I would love for the voters to get to choose out of 4 candidates, which one do we not want, instead of letting the challenger say, I'm coming for you, I'm not even going to challenge the other 2. Make the voters choose between me and him and just take the others. Why do we limit voters in that way? If the voters want 2 people of extreme opposing views, but they want them, let's have them, and they can both be on council together. But the situation that you're imagining, where there's an incumbent you don't like and you challenge them, that's taking choice away from the voters. If the voters are limited to picking only one of the 2 of you, I'm perfectly happy to have that incumbent and a new challenger both serve on a committee, both serve on the city council, because the one that this particular candidate didn't like, he still scored in the top 3. It shouldn't be the candidate's choice. It should be the voter's choice. I think I've addressed all the points.
Well, yeah, I just say, it's still, I think it should be originated by the people. It doesn't have to be door to door. John Wilson did a mail-in thing and tried that. There's other ways to do it. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just gonna say that this is a much better presentation than the first one, and I appreciate you just pushing on it, because this was a lot stronger.
Oh, thank you.
But I do, and I do acknowledge Councilor Bretma's idea that having it organically grow as a public thing does look better, and I'll just leave it at that.
It's the way it should be.
I think that it would be great to put this out to the voters, however it gets on the ballot, and I prefer it over the concept of really going towards term limits, because I think that it's okay to have more terms, so I would rather have this term.
Actually, we have term limits. They're called elections.
Yes, I'm with you there.
But I encourage you guys, go out and try to put it on the ballot if you want. I wouldn't have any problem with, I would have no say of that, but I strongly don't favor the council putting it on the ballot. And, because I don't think it's a good idea. And I'd be glad to argue the point. Zach and I will continue arguing about it, but I mean, because you can posit scenarios, and so can I, where, I mean, for instance, I don't think it's bad if somebody doesn't draw an opponent. It's happened to me a couple times. Mostly I do have opponents. I've run more than probably any of you, but it's nice if I don't have an opponent. But It also is my decision not to run against someone if I'm a citizen who sees someone they don't like and deciding that they're doing a good job. Doesn't, anyway. So I would encourage us to encourage people who want to do this to go ahead, go for it, but let's not have us put it on the ballot. Harm the situation.
I liked the way better presentation. When I left here last time, I couldn't even, if someone asked me, I would have been too confused. So this was way better. Good choice of bad moms. I guess I don't understand why it makes the council look bad if we send it to the voters. I don't understand that part. I think the voters should decide one way or the other. I don't really care how it gets on there. That's why I thought City Hall should go to the voters. I'm a big proponent of letting the voters decide what they want for their city. So I'm a little bit confused what that does for us, other than just creates an opportunity for democracy to happen and let people vote, and so I'm a little bit confused why that would be a bad thing. I do think because there's a lot of passion from a counselor and there's some discussion, I think that we should have an item, but we actually take an official vote on it. So we have to have, Ray?
I think
I'm
first,
gonna need you on this. I'm just saying that I think because we've had enough, and Diane, I'll let you talk, but I think that we need to have an agenda item where we actually take an official vote on that. I don't think we can on a discussion item. I think that
I guess the question then would be, what different issues do you want to have? Because we did this about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. We kind of went through a list of 4 things.
I think that these two right here,
Okay.
STAR voting and top 3.
Star and top 3.
And then
Okay.
just leave it the same.
We
But
can
I
put
think
that on.
all we're doing, yeah, and so we're just gonna, I think it's important that the council takes a vote on it, on the record, up, down, passes, great, doesn't pass, great, and then it's all, you know what I mean? And then we go from there, so. Are you? Yes? Yeah, okay.
If it doesn't pass through the council, then it goes into the community
Yeah.
to be.
Then
that would be an option for the community, yes.
Yeah, and I just think Zach's asking for us to take a vote on it, and I think that's fair to ask, and I think we should, to do that.
One
Ray?
question, and I'll give Ed credit for coming up with it. Does the Multnomah County Elections Bureau have the ability in their computer to even do this?
It would require a software upgrade. Multnomah County does use clear ballot machines, which are some of the most advanced, and if you call them, essentially it's a software upgrade. They won't tell you exactly what it would cost. I think that it would be a Multnomah County thing they'd have to deal with, and it would be a one-time thing.
They would send us a bill probably.
Possibly, it's not surely. Our argument would be that the benefit of better democracy, it comes down to things like how efficiently budgets are spent, what kind of industry you draw to the community. Cities that have done things like this historically have tended to evolve in a way that they tend to draw, young STEM workers and increase their, their tax base in certain ways. So that's also, a long-term way of looking at it.
But the bottom line comes down, I just say we should call and ask.
We should have all that
Because
information.
the issue for us is they would say, sure, we'll do that, but you're gonna have to pay this $57,000 software upgrade, or we're not gonna do it, because you're the only city doing it, and we're not gonna couch out at Troutdale. We've heard that from Multnomah County before, so,
Correct me if I'm wrong, Clay, but I think Lane County uses clear ballot as well, right? So Lane County, if they pass it, then, and if they use that software, then I believe. Yeah, so it's an
Yeah.
if, but it's.
yeah, for a city like Troutdale, I'll ask them though, for the smaller sub-political category of the county, they may not be so generous.
So,
I'll
we'll find that out
before
and
it comes
then,
on the agenda.
and then get it on the agenda and go from there. Okay, I'm gonna open up the public comment. I know Diane wanted to speak. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
I can actually talk about it now.
Yeah, me too.
Diane Castillo White, Troutdale, Oregon. I'm on a couple of committees in Troutdale, but in my wanting to understand STAR voting, who maybe was funding it, who was behind it, has it been vetted through the state of Oregon? I did some research, and these are a few of the papers that I found interesting to answer a few of those questions, although I did read a lot more than this. So the first article you're going to be looking at is for Lane County, and it was the Register Guard, vote no on Measure 20 2-290 STAR Voting. So it did, they did go through the petition process, which I always think is the best way to do it because you vet it through the citizenry, and they did vote no. On the third page, I find it, they discuss Lane County voters shouldn't latch on to a shiny new model, even a promising one, just because the current system needs reforming. STAR voting isn't ready for prime time. Give it a few more years, a chance to prove itself in less critical elections. Then if it continues to work as promised, backers should come with a more thorough proposal that includes a detailed education plan and analysis of cost and savings. So this is just goes along with that. Lane County voted no. It's going through Lane County again. Eugene is gathering petitions, and through some paperwork, not gathering all the correct paperwork or such in Multnomah County, it didn't go through yet. So it hasn't been voted in Multnomah County yet. And the next article, the Register Guard, seeing STAR Voting Measure 2290 would bring a new form of balloting to Lane County. So that one's a really good one, and I'm asking you to take these home and read it if we're going to continue this discussion. So it explains STAR Voting. On the second page, it talks about Lane County would become the first local government in the county to elect office holders using STAR Voting if the measure is approved, supporters say. Our group tried to get a smaller measure on this ballot in Multnomah County, but it didn't turn in the following paperwork this summer, said Eric Sample, spokesman for Multnomah County Elections. The group started the petition process in January and had to turn in 23,174 signatures by July 19th to secure a spot on the ballot. In Lane County, supporters of the local measure gathered more than the necessary 11,506 signatures before a June 21st deadline, Lane County Clerk Cheryl Bouchard said. Again, this didn't go through a direct city approval. It went through a petition process and then placed on a ballot, and then in Lane County, the majority of citizenry said no. And then it also discusses that opponents argue that the STAR voting system needs to be tested more before deciding county elections. And then it goes on to, I have an article on the info on the coalition for STAR voting. So if you go to who they are, national and statewide, the Alliance for Democracy, the Progressive Party of Oregon, the Progressive, it's some people, I'm sorry, it's going to be confused. On yours, it might be page 10. I wrote 10 on the upper right-hand corner. Others, it'll be 6 or 7. National and statewide, Alliance for Democracy, Progressive Party of Oregon, Progressive Oregon PAC affiliate of Our Revolution, Democratic Party of Oregon Black Caucus, Washington Burnocrats, I believe that would be Bernie Sanders of Our Revolution Washington, and so on. Okay, so so you get an idea of who's backing it at this time for your consumption. And then the latter is just saying that it was defeated in Lane County November 6, 2018. So there's a lot more things that I researched, and I looked up the monies that the committee has, where the monies came from and such. But I find it an interesting conversation to start, and but I feel its inception was directed more to multiple party elections, not city elections, which is nonpartisan. No county or city in Oregon has adopted STAR voting. Lane County has said no. I still find it confusing as many times as I read it, and in comparison to, for our city, for the current election system that we have. I don't have an issue when we're talking the 3-voter, that when somebody challenges somebody, because that means they did their research, they know what everybody stands for, and they're saying, I have a contrast to that. So when we're talking the 3, I don't have an issue with that. All proposals for adoption in the state of Oregon have included a petition process, which adds an appropriate vetting of the citizenry. I enjoy that. I enjoy grassroots and just say, hey, a lot of people think we have a problem. So go get those signatures. We would be the only person, only city or county that would bypass that process and just say, the council would just say, hey, let's just put it on there. It has not proven itself in the state of Oregon. Just like with marijuana and other things, if somebody else does it first, we can let it sit a couple of years and say, what were the pros, what were the cons, what were the costs? Did it create a solution, or it did not? I'm not liking the idea that Troutdale would be the first one, without vetting it through the citizenry, through a petition process, to be the ones to say, let's be the case study. I prefer that not to occur. The cost to implement is questionable, and I'm advocating at this time that we do not consider a change. I find this conversation very interesting, especially when it applied to multiple parties. It became very interesting when you have the Republicans, Democrats, and the third party and the independent and such. I've gone many times where I've gone to debates and I go, oh, the independent has some great ideas, and then they didn't have a shot. Okay, so I respect it more so in that category. As for a city that's supposed to be nonpartisan, then I'm hoping that everybody is unbiased and just tries to do what's best for the citizenry and leave the politics of the D, the R, independent, non-affiliate, which most people, I think, in Troutdale are non-affiliate, which is interesting. You'll also have a Republican in the same household as a Democrat in the household. So for me, basically, when I go and advocate for good people, it's basically a wash, as far as I'm concerned, when it's households in Troutdale. It might be a little bit more divisive in other cities and other counties, but for us, we're pretty, to me, it's pretty nonpartisan when you're looking at the household. So that's all I have on this for now. Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Good ball. Yep.
We are past the 9:30 point, which
Yeah.
technically the county is supposed to,
The city.
council is supposed to say, yes, we want to continue our council meeting, and so I will start the clock on people, but
Yeah, I'm in favor of, if you guys are, but I don't want this thing going for much longer, so we need to,
We're
been a long
near
day.
the end of the meeting. I think we can.
So,
push through.
go ahead, Paul.
Paul Wilcox, Troutdale. First, I want to back up to my earlier presentation. There was one item I forgot, which invariably happens when I try to wing it without reading from a script. On resign to run, I neglected to mention the reason for resign to run, or from my opinion anyway. What I've read in research is it's mostly to prevent candidates neglecting their current position to run for another position, like these senators and congressmen that are running for president. I mean, they're not doing their job back in Washington, D.C. But on the local level, the main the two sides of resign to run are, if you don't have resign to run, what happens is you get a midterm counselor elected mayor. It's happened in 2008, for example. So the midterm counselor becomes mayor, vacates it, his seat is vacated for the next 2 years, so you have an appointed counselor, which I don't like. You know, they should be elected. So with resign to run, that seat goes on the ballot, so it would be, 4 seats on the ballot in that election. I wanted to follow up on some of what Diane was saying. Benton County, which is Corvallis, in 2016 passed ranked choice voting for their county commissioners. So and ranked choice voting is very similar. It's the same idea, essentially. They haven't had a chance to use it yet because they haven't, well, first off, they didn't have the funding to update their machinery. And also it requires 3 candidates, which you can't always count on every single election. And finally, to Councilor Ripma, calling for all this to come via initiative, I'd remind him I've referred to this letter in the past, but if he keeps, pulling this initiative thing on me. Back in 2010, there were 3 ideas before the council for charter amendments. The one that made it onto the ballot was the one about clarifying the roles of the mayor and the councilor and the mayor and the city manager. But there were also 2 other proposals to revert back to the 2-year term for mayor, and also a council-elected mayor. And Councilor Ripmaz at the time was totally in favor of those 2. I mean, can you imagine putting councilor-appointed mayor on the ballot? I mean, if you think City Hall law is bad, that one would go down big time. And I'm just going to quote from the last line of his letter, quoting a recent Outlook editorial: "Whether Troutdale's mayor should be elected by the people or appointed by his or her peers on the city council is a question for voters ultimately to decide." So Councilor Ripma was totally in favor of the council putting those on the ballot. Thank you.
The reason was the mayor at the time was Jim Kite. He needed to be, I admit, once in a while, I do things expediently.
Okay, so we good here? Can we move on? You guys good?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're working on that, we'll get it on the agenda, everyone's good?
Yeah, we
Okay.
won't have the referendum language. We'll
Yep.
simply have the topics on for a motion to
Yep.
direct staff to prepare it if they pass.
Perfect, awesome. Okay, agenda item
I
number,
was just gonna say, sorry, and can we try to get an idea of the cost?
yeah, we're
Oh,
gonna
yeah,
have
wait
that,
for it.
Perfect, yeah.
We'll know what the county says
Alright,
if
thank
we
you.
did
Yeah.
pass one of these.
Yeah. Okay, so do we anticipate agenda 8 to go for a really long time? Because I would make a motion, if we think it's going to go for more than 20 minutes.
You guys tell me.
I mean, I'm just getting a feel from the
We
council
have the
here.
vice chair of the Parks Commission is here. Tim is here to talk about that. We've talked about it before. We simply need direction. We have the contract about to be let. We need to know what to tell them.
Okay.
What they're
What's everybody
actually doing.
feeling on it?
I don't want to be here till 10:15 talking
No,
about it.
so I think Tim and the chair, she's just here to support that the Parks
Okay.
Advisory Committee has approved the idea of the tree well in the park. We have the bid back, we spaced it out, it's $9,500 to have the tree well. I've added to you in your packet, I went up there and from the engineer's drawings, I kind of put how it would sit in there. Just so you know, the current tree actually takes up the whole platform. A tree well that's elevated like that would basically freeze up most of the platform when the tree is there. And as I noted in there also, if to do the project as part of the larger project, it's probably cheaper than later on deciding you want a tree well. You don't have to put a tree in there if you don't want to. You can probably delay that issue if you want. Really, do you want staff to go ahead and allow the contractor to put in the well?
Parks Advisory Committee has approved this?
Yeah.
Pretty
Yes.
unanimously, or?
Oh, yeah, it's been a discussion for over 4 years from when I really actually first started with the city.
Tons of support behind it.
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the
no,
Parks
it's-
Advisory Committee. Perfect, okay, it's important. Yeah. But we have them for. Okay.
So, we just need a motion from council to say yes or no on the tree well.
Go ahead.
Well, aren't we going to discuss it?
Well, that's what we're doing. Yeah, Glenn's getting ready to ask a question, and then.
Please.
Well, I'm going to be brief, so, because this item's had some history, and it's been voted down with past councils. You know, a live tree, you know, takes ongoing care, and it's subject to damage with our winds, and I know you're talking about a spruce tree, but it also occupies that space from now on, and it probably would eventually have to be replaced. An artificial tree, you know, requires storage, and it's artificial, so. But to me, you know, a live tree provides flexibility to a prime location with limited space and multiple uses. And I wouldn't expect our Parks Committee to vote anything less than to have a live tree. But I think it's our job to kind of look at the overall potential uses of that space. And, you know, it supports an industry. There's a lot of properties near us that zone 20-acre minimums, and they rely on Christmas trees to survive. And we also have the scouts that have a fundraiser and they recycle the tree. It gets used as mulch. I personally like the fragrance of a cut tree but mainly the flexibility of just a prime space, prime location. We may want to do a movie there sometime or a concert, and we got this tree in our way. So that's where I'm coming from.
Jamie?
Oh, sorry, did Dave gonna go first? Okay. Okay, I just want for clarification of my interpretation. Tonight, we're being asked if, when the parking lot is being redone, we will have a tree well, and then at a later point, we can decide if it's live or cut. Is that
Or
correct?
filled with flowers or anything, right?
So it
Isn't
doesn't-
that the?
So we're just saying within the
tree well.
project
Want
the
scope,
infrastructure
are we gonna do it
installed.
right now?
That's what,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
good point.
Decide for the project
Yeah.
contractor.
Yep.
Do you put it in or not, because when they build the wall there for the parking lot, they
Yep.
need to put in a well or not. And I'll even leave the word tree out for right now if you want to.
Yeah.
Put in the well to give us the option later on, or not.
I went and looked at the hot pink marks, and it doesn't seem to be too crazy.
Not too intrusive.
Not too intrusive, yeah. Thank you for doing that.
Dave?
On the Parks Committee, when did you guys talk about this?
Go ahead.
I've only been on the committee for a little while, but we talked about it in November.
Okay, and you were aware of the $9,500 cost,
But we talked about the well, putting the well in now.
not the tree necessarily. Yeah, because my feeling is, and was, that the $9,500 would buy, 1,000 years worth of trees around here, and or something like that, maybe 100 years worth. But I think there would be disadvantages to a live tree, like Glenn mentioned, but to put in the well at the time that the parking lot's being redone, which is the most economical time to do it, is the Parks Committee okay with putting in the well and later deciding this tree question? I mean, we still could do cut trees.
You have a showcase for it, place for it to go in.
Yeah.
Conduit in the tree well where you can just drop a dead tree into if you wanted to also use it as the base, so you don't have to do all the scaffolding we do now.
And I kind of thought that's what we were gonna do, actually, yeah.
Oh, a cut tree, not like a dead tree. Okay.
Well, you cut it.
A harvested tree, yes. Not just a random dead tree we find. Okay, yes.
That's what Councilor White and I do.
Got it.
We harvest them, we don't kill them.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on, is should we put this in here? So are we all comfortable?
Is that the only thing? That's the only thing.
That's
we-
what we're-
I don't think there's language in there about it.
And the parking project came below budget anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's at like
So-
386,000, and to add the tree well, just the well, to add the bike racks and the bike shelter, it totals up to 406, all those little extras for a $400,000 budget, so I consider that within budget.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Are we comfortable then, you guys, with
Yeah.
a motion to?
Just one quick, I'm a little confused because I think we already have what you're talking about then is already there. It's just not in that particular location.
I don't know that we have a place to drop a tree in.
I looked
That's what we
at it.
currently use right now. I put in, 3 years ago, I put an insert in that we can put a live tree.
This actually moves the center of the tree back at least 8 feet, so you do get more of the platform under this system. Because right now.
Yeah,
if
it's
you go
on-
up
it's
that
on the platform.
Well, Councilor Moon was up there on Friday night. Did you have?
It was cozy.
It was cozy. You were kissing the tree in your backside. This gives us another 6 or 8 feet
backside?
more room up there. That's why I gave you the picture so you can see how far it's in.
Yeah.
The current tree actually sits right in that red dot and goes out 8 feet toward the front of the platform.
I'm good.
We're good? Can we take a vote? Motion?
Well, I move that we authorize the inclusion of a tree well in when the contract is let to, on the Mayor Square parking lot.
Second?
Okay, good.
Counselor Ritma? Counselor Kranz?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor
I'm in the
Moon?
Christmas spirit.
Yes.
Yes.
Counselor Hudson?
All right, thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, staff communications.
Thank you for spending so long here tonight, council. You don't have to meet again until January 14th.
There's not a lot of extra little meetings in there like we've had.
Yeah, you don't have any scheduled now.
No other, good, okay.
Of course, the city is closed offices on the 25th and the 1st. We had a great tree lighting, was commented earlier on Friday night. Councilman Moon did a great job. We got on TV, that was great. And finally, don't forget, Friday night at the Reynolds High School multi-purpose room, starting at 5 o'clock, Santa's gonna be there, snacks and stuff, a short movie at 6:30, then the main attraction, Bad Santa Mama. That's what the post said.
Bad Santa Mama.
4 to 2 to 3.
Elf will be there Friday night. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, council comments. Dave?
I wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Season's greetings to everybody. I follow the same compliments. I applied for a policy committee with the League of Oregon City to serve as a transportation policy committee person and was accepted to do that. So I'm
Nice,
going to keep
congrats.
pursuing the transportation route
Nice.
with policy. Yep.
Congrats.
Thank you.
All right, I have nothing.
I think we're a lot closer to having our community officer on board, and I know we've got a new code enforcer starting, and just Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
I love the idea of an ad hoc committee to clarify and codify the committee appointment process. I volunteer to be on such an ad hoc committee. I would love to do it.
Yeah.
And we can get that going.
Mayor, I think
So.
ex officio was appointed, Councilor.
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect.
Yep.
All right. On that note, happy holidays to you all.
All right.
Move we adjourn.
All in favor? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?